Wait, are we live? I don't see the live in the
We
top.
are live. Yeah.
We're
We
live?
are?
Yeah.
I don't see the live at the top. Hold up. I don't see it. We're not live. Oh, we are live. Yo, we're
Super
live.
unprofessional.
All right. All right. Hey, man, listen, cut that out. Cut that out. Anyways, all right. Hello and welcome to 3 Point Weekly. Today is a very special episode. Shout out to the community out there because this is going to double as our 100 subscriber celebration. It took quite a while to get here, but I just want to start off with thanking everybody who subbed or supported, even watched one stream over the year and a half we've been doing this. Only up from here, and things are looking good, man. It's a fun time to be an NBA fan. It's a fun time to talk hoops. And we have a lot to talk about today because it's been about 2 weeks since we've had a podcast here on 3 Point Weekly. And since then, we've had the NBA draft and the beginning of free agency. So, moves wise, there is a ton to talk about. And today, in terms of bias, all three of us are Eastern Conference fans. And one guy in particular on this podcast who may or may not be to my upper left, he has a lot of things to say about his favorite team. He's repping the hoodie right now, Mr. Canada himself. Devin, run the NBA. Talk to me, bro. I know you have this Raptors rant scheduled. Let's get it going.
Man, let's just go full screen. It's got to be done. I want to start off with addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the Fred VanVleet contract. Him being gone is the problem, but him not getting such an absurd deal from our front office is not the problem. I'm not mad that we didn't pay him a 4-year, $160 million deal. That would just be stupid. Kudos to him for his bag in Houston. He's going to get his bag over there over the next few years, and all the credit to him. He's deserved it. Is it a bad contract? Yeah, it's a bad contract, but that's not my problem anymore. He's gone. The biggest problem is we don't have a fucking point guard. That's the biggest problem. We have a point guard, but we're still trying to compete. If we lost Freddie and we were trying to rebuild, it's fine because I don't care if we lost him. We can trade Siakam, we can trade OG, and we're good. We get our assets. We have Scotty, we have Grady Dick, and we're good. The problem is now we're going to try and run fucking pick and rolls with Scotty Barnes and Jakob Podol. And all the love in the world at Scotty Barnes, and he's a great prospect. This man is not a point guard, at least not right now. There's the offense, especially that starting lineup. Lord help us, because you can talk about Fred VanVleet struggles as a shooter. You can talk about Freddie having a bad shooting year last year. Scotty and Siakam are now your playmakers. Your point guard is Scotty Barnes, so your spacing and ability to do anything off of screens at the top of the three-point line is gone because you have no three-point shot to respect whatsoever. And you're asking Scotty to go from being a center from half of last year to now being a point guard with no spacing, with a new offensive system, with a new head coach. And the replacement was Dennis Schroeder, who's probably coming off of the bench and is being compared by Raptors fans to Fred VanVleet in terms of his three-point shooting. In what world is Dennis Schroeder an equivalent three-point shooter to Fred VanVleet? I don't give a fuck about their percentages last year. You can tell me they were the same, and they probably were. You cannot tell me that Dennis Schroeder and Fred VanVleet were shooting the same difficulty and same volume of three-point shots last year. They just weren't. There's no argument there. There are two very different levels of shooters there. So Grady Dick might be back. Gary Trent opted in, and Otto Porter's back from injury. So sure, you have three shooters. Our starting lineup has none of them other than Gary Trent and no point guard. How does that offense work? So I really hope that at this point we finally decide Siakam needs to go, OG needs to go. We reset. Dick's there, Barnes is there, Podol's locked up, so whatever, he can stick around. Good to have him, I guess. But losing Freddie and not being able to get Gabe Vincent, not being able to get Javon Carter, that's the biggest loss. It's the fact that we had to rely on Dennis fucking Schroeder being the replacement, who's not even going to start, even though he probably should, so Scotty doesn't look like a fool for the first 10 to 15 games of the season while he's trying to figure out what the fuck he's doing, because no hate on Scotty, it's just a shitty situation to be in. Now we're just stuck on a team that's even more mid than we were last year, just probably as a 12 seed instead of a 9 seed. So hopefully these Siakam to Atlanta rumors have some volition to them, and we can just reset. We can let Malachi Flynn get point guard reps for all I care at this point, even though I've been one of the most harsh critics of him in the Raptors fan world over the last couple of years. But losing Freddie and not getting a valid replacement, that's what shocked us. And hell, if we don't finally decide to rebuild with Freddie gone, it's just chalked. It's just chalked.
That was generational. That rant will feed nations. That was incredible. I don't even have too much to add because you took a good 6 minutes up there. It's just nothing but listen. I didn't know you were bilingual the way you were just spitting some absolute diabolical facts at Masai was doing. But the way my mindset has flipped on this team in the past 2 weeks it's sad, man. I was so happy. I saw our draft board. I saw Grady Dick get drafted. And I'm like, all right, I'm down. I'm so there. Because I'm like, hey, a rebuilding team, I know this dude's going to be a shooter, and I've heard a lot of hype around him. I'm like, all right, we didn't even trade the pick. We drafted a guy. And I'm like, all right, it's time to start the rebuild, you know? I'm high on Grady Dick. I like the pick. Scotty Barnes is still young. I'm like, all right, let's go. But these guys decided that they want to keep trying to compete. It's time to stop, all right? And listen, if Masai Ujiri, if his whole thing is no matter what happens, we're always going to try to be competitive. Any team built by me is going to try and win as much as possible. Buddy, you got to go. And I hate to say it, he's brought a lot of prosperity to this franchise, who were a bit of a poverty franchise before he was there and have basically been a playoff mainstay besides the past couple of years in his entire tenure. That's cool, but at the end of the day, sometimes a relationship needs to end, and it's no fault of one person. You just get to a certain point in your life where it's not the best fit for you anymore. And at this point, what Masai Ujiri needs to do, he needs to go to an up-and-coming team that he can turn into that consistent playoff team, into that title-level team like he did here. And there's still very much a place for him in this league, and he's still a great GM/president of operations/whatever you want to call him. He is still great at that. If he's going to refuse to rebuild, it's done. It's cooked. This team is not going to reach the levels they were once at because they're not going to allow themselves to acquire enough talent. Toronto's never been a big free agent destination, and it's not every day that a Kawhi Leonard becomes available for trade. So if we're not getting it done, we need to find a new way, and that's going to be the draft. And if you don't want to rebuild and get high in the draft, well, we're never going to get back to where we were. And so as great as Masai has been, and this is no hate to him and no slander on his skills on team building, but it looks like it's just time to where somebody needs to step in and say, hey, we're rebuilding with you or without you. Because going into next year and the year after that and the year after that and being perennially around like an 8 to 10 seed with no real direction because you have enough talent but not enough that really complements each other and supplements each other enough to really go far, especially without like a top 10 level player. It's looking quite grim. It is looking quite grim as a Raptors fan.
Yeah, first off, that rant by Dev was everything that we expected to be plus more. But you make a good point, Gabe, like kind of comparing it to like a relationship. Like sometimes you just reach a peak in a relationship where it's like it's not going to get much better from here. So you just kind of got to move on. And I think Masai is like in that position too because a lot of the moves that we've seen them try to make is to still try and be competitive. But like Dev was saying, losing Fred for nothing, not replacing him. You're going to put Scotty Barnes in such a tough situation. That's a player that has such good upside. And when we were talking a few weeks ago about Marco being the new head coach and everything, that was my point. I'm like, I want to see what he gets out of Scotty Barnes. And I agree. I don't think Scotty Barnes being the lead ball handler is going to amount to much success for him or for the team. I think it's going to stunt his growth, man. We see him trying to throw bigger wings on the ball, run them at point guard. It doesn't really work most of the time. And I don't know if that's what Scotty's game is going to be best suited for. So that's what I really dislike the most about losing Fred and not replacing him. But I just feel like one thing we always talk about on this podcast is picking a direction. I really agree with you guys. I think the Raptors just need to pick a direction, go towards more of a full rebuild. You know, you already got one really good young piece of Scotty Barnes. Grady Dick, I think, is going to be a really good basketball player for a long time just because of his floor spacing ability. And I think he has a little more to his game than just catch and shoot. And there's nothing wrong with just, you know, continuing to collect, you know, top draft picks because we haven't seen a Raptors team be very bad. Like, that's one thing Masai has done, has been able to make the Raptors a perennial playoff team pretty much every year for like the last decade, which before that was pretty much unheard of in Toronto. Like, this team was never in the playoffs year in and year out for much of their existence. So he's done a good job, but everything's just kind of ran its course, I think, with him making the decisions. And they could do a lot better, maybe just replacing him, getting somebody that's more catered towards a rebuild, and just building up young talent, making Scotty Barnes the focal point of this franchise. And I think that'd be the best decision moving forward. But, you know, losing Fred for nothing is definitely tough. And if they're going to try and still be competitive, which it looks like that's what they're trying to do, if Pascal's still there, OG's still there, it's going to be a rough season, and it might be even more rough than last season.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be more rough than last season. There's no doubt about it. Like, and like, I know you probably feel the same way, Gabe. Like, that half-court offense last year was just so bad on so many nights. And it's going to be even worse this year. Like, and I didn't think that was possible, but it's going to be even worse.
The only saving grace as far as that goes might be scheming, because Nick Nurse, he loved to have his complex defense and his complicated schemes and throwing box and ones at people, doing whatever to shut down a star player. Like, they called him a mad scientist on that side of the floor. But on offense, he wasn't really that guy. Maybe with the coaching change, like, that has helped a little bit. But at the same time, I know I talk all the time about, like, Fred VanVleet's better as an off guard, and so he shouldn't be your primary ball handler or primary playmaker. But he was still by far the best playmaker on this roster. And it's just now, like, imagine, put yourself in this scenario, because this is probably going to be at least 20 Raptors games this year, is Scotty is a 28% three-point shooter. Might, if he ascends, maybe he goes up to, I don't know, 33. Gary Trent, very inconsistent. He's either on or he's off. You still have OG and Siakam in town, and you didn't just give Jakob Poeltl that bag to do nothing. Now, if one of those guys is off, I guess you can have Grady Dick, but I don't like that floor spacing. And it's gonna have to be a masterful coaching job to make that offense work. If the Raptors are even in the top half of offenses in the league next year, I'm very, very happy with Rajakovic.
Yeah, no, it would have to be scheming at that point because, you, like you said, Gabe, you're just looking up and down the roster. Where's the playmaking going to come from consistently? Where's the shooting going to come from consistently? You know, like you said, Gary Trent. As much as I like Gary Trent, he's very inconsistent. You know, one game he could have 35. Next game he could have 3 points on 1 of 10 shooting. Like, that's just how he is. And then if you're relying on Grady Dick as a rookie to come in and be like that elite floor spacer, that's just asking a lot for somebody that was just playing college basketball. So, yeah, I feel you guys' frustrations because it's like you're just kind of stuck in that, like, middle of the pack to where, like, you're going to be just fighting for a playing spot, especially with some teams in the East getting better over this all season. It's going to be rough, especially for a first-year head coach, man. And you're asking a lot for him to come in and just be a mastermind with a team that's not really catered towards the type of offense that he's trying to run.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think this team looks much more like the Wizards of this past year than a team fighting for the play-in tournament. I do not feel confident. Barring another move, like there might be a Thad Young plus Chris Boucher type trade that gets made for some guard that helps a little bit. But outside of that, I really don't see where this team, like, I've already seen, I know it's Raptors fans, and Raptors fans on Twitter like to be outlandish. They said the same thing last year, but I'm already seeing Raptors fans tweet stuff like, here's our depth chart, and we're going to be a top 5 seed in the East next year. It's like, bro, you guys said that last year. We had Fred last year, and we were nowhere near that. And now we lose Fred, and our replacement is Dennis Schroeder, and Otto Porter's back from injury, and that makes us a top 5 seed, even though Orlando's better, even though the Pacers are better, even though the Knicks are now in the picture when we didn't think they were at the beginning of last year. The Cavs are in there. Like, there's just no way. So, like you said, Gabe, if we're somehow a top half offense next year, all the kudos to Darko and the coaching staff, because that in and of itself would be a minor miracle. But let's just hope they realize that it is time. Send out Siakam, send out OG, just hit the reset button, get some future assets back, and let's at least be a 13 or a 14 seed and not be trying to push for the 10.
Yeah, but I'm so serious when I say, like, if it's that time for Masai to go, it's that time for Masai to go, because he's done very well, but it just looks like it's time to move on. The roster construction is just, it's not meant to play winning basketball, but at the same time, there's just so much there that you could get so much value out of. All it takes is one guy with an open mind and the ability to reset to really come in and just put this franchise in a great place moving forward. But moving forward with our episode, we said we were starting in the Eastern Conference in terms of our personal biases and teams we like to support, and we have not heard from Reek here on this platform since 36 was shipped out of Boston. So I just need to give you the floor. I gave Devin the floor to talk about Toronto. Now we're going to go to the other side to talk to me.
It has been that long since we've recorded. It's only a couple of weeks, but a lot happens in the off season over that amount of time. It definitely like sucks as a fan losing Marcus Smart, just because like he's been there for so long. He's been the heart and soul, and he's really like put blood on the line for this team. And it was there when like when we were making the playoffs, was like a 7-8 seed, and was there when we were 1 seed when we shouldn't have been 1 seed, and was there when we was in the finals. Like he's been there this entire time, so it sucks losing him. And I saw a lot of Celtics fans like getting a little overly emotional. It's like, bro, we've seen Paul Pierce and KG and Ray Allen all leave and Rondo leave within like a year span or a 2-year span. Like we've seen pieces of this franchise that have been there for a long time leave. We will be okay, and I think we got better because of it. One, I think Kristaps, if this is how the team's going to look moving forward, barring any more big moves, like a Jaylen Brown trade or anything, which I'm not expecting that, getting really, I think somebody that can be a really good third option, because Porzingis has been asked to be like a second option to like a Luka Doncic, and then whatever was going on in Washington, when I think he played some of his best basketball maybe since like his Knicks days. I think he was really good for them last season. But him being like a true third option can really just space the floor, maybe get some like post touches here and there, maybe when Tatum or Brown's off the floor. I think that can really unlock his game a little more. He won't be asked to do as much, but he can do what he's really good at, and that is pick and pop, spacing the floor, and the occasional post up here and there. And I think even though like I think he's an upgrade from what Al Horford was bringing to the table offensively, even though defensively Al Horford was still really good. I think Kristaps can still do a little bit of like the rim protection stuff that Horford was doing. So I like that move from that sense. And I think it just brings a lot more versatility on the offensive end, and it won't be just as stagnant as Tatum, Brown going to ISO ball late in games. I think Porzingis adds a little more of a different element. And I've been very vocal. I think Derek White does everything that Marcus Smart does, at least last season. And I think he's doing it better than Marcus Smart was in this past season. So I'm fine with Derek White being that gritty defensive guard that we have on the roster. Keeping Brogdon, I think, was very big. If anybody watches my channel, I was high on Jordan Walsh. I was ecstatic that we got him in the draft. I think he can provide some stuff from day one. And then I didn't have O'Shea Brissett on my radar before the free agency, but getting him another wing, I really like what he brings to the table too. I've been a fan of him since he was at Syracuse. So overall, I'm pretty happy with our offseason so far. If anything else big happens, I'll definitely be here to talk about it. But if this is our team going forward, I'm okay with it. Maybe we'd like to see another guard get added to the rotation. That's why I've been like really a long right to find a way to Boston, but that's probably not going to happen now. But if another guard is added to the mix, I'll be happy with that. I guess next is just figuring out what's up with JV's extension. Maybe seeing if you can not pay the full max, maybe get that number down a little bit. And I think that would be a very like successful, like A+, close to A+ type of offseason. I'm definitely a fan of what Brad's been doing. I think we got better because of it, and that's good because I think a lot of other teams, top teams in the East, have made moves to get better, and a lot of teams like Philadelphia might still have moves to be made with James Harden.
Yeah, like you say, I think the Celtics front office as a whole has done a really good job so far this summer. Porzingis addition will be really good. I like what they did even just on draft night, getting a bit more future flexibility with their picks. Moved out from late in the first round, ended up drafting Jordan Walsh later on, which was a good pick in its own right. and got, I believe, 4 future second-round picks. So they got a lot more flexibility in that right after they traded a couple away for Derek White only a bit over a season ago. But like you say, moving forward, I don't think there's a ton they have to do for the rest of this offseason. Maybe they look to add a guard. Maybe they just look to unleash Peyton Pritchard into the rotation now for the rest of next year, if he's even willing to do that, or if that bridge is just fully burned at this point. So that's probably the only minor decision that has to be made. The biggest thing, like you say, is just what happens with Jaylen Brown. That's priority number one for the rest of the offseason, figuring out if you extend him, how much you extend him for, if he's willing to negotiate down from the max, or if you just have to trade him. That's really the only thing that matters for Boston at this point. They've made already 2 fairly significant moves, and both of which I think were quite good, that were able to improve this roster in a way that will be able to give them a bit of a different dynamic from, like you say, just the Tatum and Jaylen Brown duo game that we've had so long now for Boston the last couple of years. So I think that's a nice added element for them. Maybe we see some more shuffling in the front court if Al Horford gets moved off of with that addition, but I don't think that's overly imminent. If it does happen, I don't think that's an off-season move. So we'll see how that progresses potentially towards the trade deadline, or even more so likely maybe into next off-season. But for the time being, it's just about Jaylen Brown and making sure that you maximize him in one way or another, whether that's an extension or whether that's potentially a trade if they just are not willing to give him that max.
Yeah, this certainly was not the offseason that I expected for Boston, but at least short term, I do really like the direction they're headed in. I think you guys pretty much just hit the nail on the head, just talking about all the moves they made and really just reinforcing what they already had. Like, as guys like Al Horford were going to age and probably make their way out of the city in the next few years, bringing in a guy like Porzingis so you can get some more mileage out of, like, that's good. Only thing with that whole move where I'm like kind of is not even to do with Porzingis. It's more so just like the fact that Brogdon was like basically all but shipped out and then is still there. Now, if he's cool, then I think he still fits on the roster really well. And especially for a team that needs playmaking, he's going to be like invaluable. So if they make that work, which I have trust that they can, because you've heard reports about it that things seem to be going pretty well. I like that a lot. Long term, that Jaylen Brown $300 million is just gonna hit. Like, I feel like that really can hamper your roster flexibility in the future. But if we're just sitting here talking like right now is our window and we want to win a title in 23-24, I think you're in a pretty good spot to do so.
Yeah, and the window is like right now, but as long as like Tatum's on the team, you definitely have like a chance to be a very competitive team. Yeah, that's the only other thing, like you mentioned, Gabe, is like the Brogdon situation. But Brogdon's like he's a pro's pro, man. Like, that is a super professional. So I'm sure he understands, like, it's just kind of the nature of the NBA. It's kind of a business. But like you said, as long as he's cool, I think keeping him is definitely big time. And even if that's your guard rotation, that's still 2 pretty like impactful guards. If it's just Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon. But you're going to get a lot of Tatum on the ball, Jaylen Brown on the ball. So this team moving forward, definitely looking good. Grant Williams is probably gone now, but I think like O'Shea Brissett, Jordan Walsh, I think they can fill in those Grant Williams minutes pretty well. So, very good offseason. Like you said, Gabe, I'm like, these aren't the moves I expected, but I'm pretty happy with them as a fan.
For sure. Definitely lots of reasons to be happy with the Celtics offseason so far. It's funny how we basically got through the entire discussion without mentioning Grant Williams. It kind of lets you know where we're all kind of at with his future with Boston. I'd be very surprised at this point if he's back. But like you say, I think they did a fine job replacing him with Walsh and Brissett to fill that role to a point and into next season. But that'll move us to one of their main competitors out east in the Milwaukee Bucks. They did bring back Brook Lopez, and they did bring back Chris Middleton. So all signs right now point towards just running it back, even though they got bounced in the first round, and hoping that that's going to be enough to make another deep run.
Yeah, I like the Bucks, man. I think they did what they should have. Yes, they didn't make a big splash or any like super impactful moves, but as one of the teams with the most to lose coming into this offseason and being able to not lose them, for lack of a simpler way to really put it, they set themselves up for more success. When you're one of the best teams in the NBA, and really the main criticism that people had of you was, one, like the Giannis free throw thing, which is all internal, and even Is it really a problem when they won a title without it? You can argue about that, but you're picking hairs at that point. The main issue was really the coaching, and they changed the coaching. So as far as their offseason and how they got better, I think they addressed the main criticism people had of their franchise. And roster-wise, I don't really think people had that many complaints. And so with them being able to keep most of what they got, it's just like I think things look cool in Milwaukee. Now, am I going to say it's perfect? No, I don't, because I think Javon Carter was a quality backup guard. I think Joe Ingles was a solid veteran presence. Those two guys out, I'm sure you'll miss that at certain points. But as far as telling me that you still have Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez as 4 of your 5 starters, when a deep playoff series, you're probably only going to play like 7 or 8 guys. I'm solid knowing that this team is going to be very good next year and will definitely still be in contention. Miami seems to always have their number, except for the year they won the title. But it's things happen. Teams lose series, and I'm glad that they didn't panic and make a bunch of crazy changes because, like I said, they're one of the best teams in basketball. They're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that like you touched it on the head, talking about the main issue was the coaching. And we'll see how Charles Lee does, but I think if you hire him because Giannis probably liked him, so good move there. Not Charles Lee. I forgot even who their head coach is. That was Adrian Griffin, right? Yeah, Adrian Griffin. I don't know why I said Charles Lee. Adrian Griffin. But with that being said, the fact that they were able to bring back Brook and Middleton, I thought one of them was definitely gone. But getting them back on pretty friendly contracts too for the next few years, that shows like this is our window. We got Giannis for this amount of time. This is a window. Let's go ahead, go all in. What I want to see the most is just like kind of like how Christian Brown was for the Nuggets. Can any of these rookies or even like Marshawn Beauchamp become like very impactful rotation players for them? Because they're going to need it, man, especially like losing Javon Carter, who's a very quality role player for them. They're going to need some young guys to really be able to step up and not really take on like a crazy role, but just take on that kind of, I can come in, I can do a little bit of everything. I can knock down some shots, play some high level defense, and just make winning basketball plays. I think that's going to be the most important part. But you got Giannis, you're always going to have a chance. And I agree with Gabe. Like, I'm glad that they didn't panic and just start trading people, trying to get a star name in there if they could. But I think, they were the best team in basketball last year with this roster. I think a coaching change is going to help that, even though they might not like jump up to like 60+ wins or something like that. But I think they'll be better on the court. I think Giannis is going to come back more motivated than ever, especially how just their last season ended. So I'm excited for them. I think they're going to be right there competing for a championship once again. And we'll just see how like pieces like the young guys, the rookies, Livingston, Andre Jackson can come in and produce.
Yeah, I think it's very clear this summer that they've set themselves a 2-year window. Giannis has got 2 years left before he can opt out. Lopez is there for the next 2 years. Drew Holiday's got another year and then an additional year and a player option. So their next 2 years is their window. After that, who knows what's happening in Milwaukee, because Drew Holiday sounds like he might retire at the end of that deal. Brook Lopez is going to be at the type of time he might retire at the end of that deal. Giannis might want out at that point. Chris Middleton only has, a year left, but I don't have a player option, so he could be gone too. Like, they have 2 years, essentially. And they're in a decent spot, but like you said, Tyrik, they're probably going to have to hope that a couple of guys can step up and prove themselves to be more valuable rotational guys this year, like a Marion Beauchamp, especially coming into year 2. They probably need to look to sign someone else at the point guard position, but given the fact that they apparently think Goran Dragic is a fine Javon Carter replacement, I'm not sold on the fact that that's going to be the case. And even though it is a new head coach, the Bucks do seem to have a theme with making their backup point guard an old point guard who probably shouldn't be playing anymore. I hope that's not a theme that continues with this coaching staff, but it does seem to be a theme. And Goran Dragic probably shouldn't be getting backup point guard minutes as of 2 years ago, never mind this year. So that's a concern to me. But other than that, like, Grayson Allen's still going to be your starter. That was probably never going to be improved, but that's going to be one of the things they'll have to look at and deal with come postseason time again. But their core guys are back, and the biggest thing for them is just going to be hoping that everyone can stay healthy and that there's no regression, because Brook Lopez is 35, Holiday is 33, and Chris Middleton is 32. So they're not the oldest of bunch. They're not late 30s, but they're not exactly the fleetest of foot guys now either. They're going to start picking up a few more injuries. They're going to start being at risk of regressing a little bit. So the pieces are there. The talent is there. They got Chris Middleton back. They got Brooke Lopez back. That was priority number one. Everything else was secondary and a bit more of a luxury for them this offseason. But I would like to still see them make a few more additions around the edges if they can. Making sure that they got Jay Crowder back was good. I think even though he was a bit in and out of the rotation for them, I didn't mind what he brought for them when he did play last year. And hopefully with a full season, new coaching staff, he can be more comfortable from day one next year. He also didn't play for like the first 55 games of last year. So it was always going to be a weird adjustment for him coming back in to the Bucks team once he was traded at the deadline. So between him and Bobby Portis, they should be pretty good up front, but maybe a guy in the backcourt. That's probably the most important thing they're looking at now for the rest of the offseason. But other than that, they should be there. Would I say they're the far and away favorites like we maybe thought they were last year? I would say no, but they should be right up there in the conversation with their quarterback.
Yeah, they really just did a good job knowing what their window was. If they would have gone out here and just signed like some of these role players, just some like 3-4 year deals, it's like, what if you get to a point where in 2 years, Drew's on his way out, Brooks on his way out, and then Giannis and Middleton maybe even are on their kind of last legs in this franchise, and it's like, oh, now we still have these role players under contract for 2 more seasons. I don't know if that's something that they would really want, and this keeps them flexible of knowing, hey, our window is now. We're going to get it done now, and then we'll be flexible if things kind of fall down 2 years down the road, and we need to take a step back and think, do we need to reset this? Do we need to reinforce this? Is it just a retool, or what does the future of our franchise look like? They really have put themselves in a place where they're not too locked in beyond about 2025, and I think that's a good thing for them, just knowing what your situation is and capitalizing on that, especially because they're one of the best teams in basketball. You have to think, if you're one of those like free agents who's a veteran guy and you're like, I might have a little bit more to give and I'll go somewhere and try to win a championship, the Bucks should be on your short list of like 4 or 5 teams that you want to go sign with. So if they can find guys to like fill out just the rest of that rotation, are vet minimum guys always the best guys? No, sometimes they are more name than actual production, but at the end of the day, I think they should be able to get them some people just to fill the gaps that they need.
They're in kind of like a fun position. Like, say if it does fall apart, like at the end of this 2-year window, like we're saying, still got Giannis under contract, and say if he wants out, people are going to pay a lot to get Giannis, like a lot of picks. So you can still reset, get a lot of draft capital back, maybe a young player. So they're in kind of like that position where if it does fall apart and they just don't win any more championships in this window, as an organization, if Giannis is the chip that you got to move to, reset the franchise, you can do that. And like Gabe said, people will probably come and play with Giannis, some, veteran guys, if that's the case. Or maybe like a star that wants out, he might pick Milwaukee because Giannis is that good. So they're in kind of a fun position because they have Giannis. And at the end of this window, they definitely have a lot of different ways that they can go.
Yeah, it's hard to be in a bad spot when you have one of the best few players in the league in their prime. So next 2 years should be fun for them, and then where they go from there, who knows? But either way, they're going to have Giannis on their roster, so they should have some upside one way or another, whether he remains on the roster or he is the fuel to their rebuild. But let's move on to the Eastern Conference finalists last year. The Miami Heat have lost Gabe Vincent and have lost Max Strus. We know our boy Trent has been struggling with the departure of Gabe Vincent, most notably, especially to his very much his foe, the LA Lakers. We'll get what you think first, Gabe, because it was quite a fun reaction when we saw Gabe Vincent go to the Lakers live.
Miami better get Damian Lillard, dog. That's really, I think that's the takeaway. Like, in all seriousness, the moves that they made to try and replace those guys, like Josh Richardson is a quality basketball player. I'm probably saying it wrong, but Jamie Jaquez, I think he can provide some solid stuff on the wing. I don't know how much rotation he gets, but like I think there is a chance that he could become a commodity, and so not bad for like a late, like after the lottery, kind of mid to late first round pick. Bringing back Kevin Love is just a veteran guy. He gave them some quality minutes in the playoffs. Thomas Bryant, he had really good backup minutes last year a lot of times. So like we definitely had some funny moments talking about him on Kia threes, but Thomas Bryant, he's probably the best backup they've had for Bam in a while. So I think that was a good sign. But at the end of the day, I just listed all those guys, and something that all those guys do not fix is that this offense can just really get stagnant sometimes, and it's hard to get that going. And two guys that were like outside of Jimmy Butler, really the most notable for getting that offense going would be like Strus or Vincent hitting a couple shots in a row, and just all of a sudden things are sparked into gear. Now, Tyler Hero is still in the roster, and he'll come back. He didn't play in the playoffs, so it's very easy to forget that in a lot of the regular season games, he was that guy for them. But he's not big enough to where he's going to take this team to the next level, because for them, the next level is a title. They've been to the stage before. So that's it. That's getting better. It's winning the championship at this point. And for them to do that, it's going to have to be a Dame trade. And it's going to have to be a Dame trade where they don't give a ton up. Like, Hero's out in that deal. And I would assume money-wise, Duncan's probably out in that deal as well. So if they can find a way to bring him in, this team is very well poised to make a run and make it out of the East again, especially knowing that Spoelstra has the Bucks' number, especially knowing that they've beat the Celtics 2 out of 3 times in some very close series, and now they add a superstar player in Damian Lillard. It ups their chances there as well in a potential rematch. It makes them look good, but without him, yes, they time in and time out prove me wrong. Yes, they time in and time out overperform. Yes, every single time they manage to find some random undrafted guys that end up being way better than half the players drafted in the lottery. But I'm going to do it again. I'm going to say if they don't make this Dame trade, like, they're just not going to be that same team. And that's going to be the move that extends their window. And it's because we are sitting here on July 2nd recording this and not on July 5th or whatever it may be, that I can't exactly tell you, is this team going to be a title contender next year or not. But as of now, saying the guys they brought in versus losing Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, I'm inclined to say no.
Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, that you want them to get Dame without having to give up too much. But it seems like Portland is being a smart front office for once and saying, like, hey, we're not just going to ship you to Miami just because you want to go there. We're gonna weigh all these offers that we get and, try and get the best package back possible, which is so surprising to see Portland do something like that. I thought they were just going to honor Dame, be like, you know what, we'll take less. Go ahead. We'll just take like a bunch of picks and whatever. If that's the case, I don't see really a way that Dame is going to Miami unless more than a Tyler Hero is involved in that deal, and Miami just doesn't have, like, they can't involve like a Bam in that deal. Like, that just kind of defeats the purpose of getting Damian Lillard, honestly. So that's tough. It is, and I think it was kind of inevitable to see like guys like Strus and Vincent leave just because they're going to get big money from organizations that would really want them and use them. And I shout out to those guys from going from undrafted to getting very good contracts. That's great to see. It's going to be tough losing them. They're going to be relying on Duncan Robinson to take what he just did in the postseason and kind of replicate that to becoming back in a full rotational kind of use of a player. Hero coming back is obviously good. I like Jaime Jaquez a lot. I'm interested to see like what his role is on the team. I think he's NBA ready to come in and produce. Now, how many minutes he's going to get from a night-to-night basis, that's going to be seen. But it's tough. They really are just banking on finding a way to get Damian Lillard. And they just better hope that a lot of the other teams that can offer great packages in the trade are not really interested in giving up that much for Dame, because there are a lot of teams that probably could offer more, like maybe even like a Brooklyn. Boston has the Jaylen Brown trade chip if they want to. And there's probably more teams that I'm just not even thinking of that can offer a pretty nice, solid deal that's better than Miami's. So they're relying on that. If they get them, that's going to be great. But if not, they're going to be in the same position, like you said, Gabe, like relying on guys to play bigger than what, we might expect them to play. Like maybe some undrafted guys, maybe it's Jaime Jaquez, who knows?
Yeah, they're going to rely on that like they normally have. Haywood Highsmith's going to have to come in and play a big role next year. He's probably the most evident guy that's ready for a leap. Not that he fills a role directly that is being lost, and Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, but maybe Cody Martin slides up the lineup a bit, plays more at the 2 if they need, and Haywood Highsmith comes in at the 3. But the point guard spot's the problem. That's the most evident thing from Heat fans. That was the thing that they were most worried of losing. I think most of them expected Max Strus out the door. It was this Gabe Vincent back, and he wasn't. And unlike the Raptors, although I'm not a fan of our desperation signing of Dennis Schroeder, and I've made that very clear, Miami didn't do anything. And now the point guards left on the market are like putting in an offer sheet for Ayo Dosunmu, signing Corey Joseph, signing Ish Smith. Like, there's nothing. There's just nothing there of any bit of caliber. So unless you're trying to trade for one, which Miami don't have assets, especially if it's like they can put something together for a Dame trade, but they don't exactly have the depth to start packaging together players to trade for if they would have went for a Monte Morris or that type of point guard. They don't have that. They have hero and salary filler and 2 first-round picks. That's their trade assets. That's all they have. So the only way they get Dame, like you guys have alluded to, is if Portland just somehow don't get a better offer, which they should, or if they just are willing to ship Dame out to Miami, which thankfully it seems like they are not willing to do. So it's a tough spot for Miami. And like you said, Gabe, it always seems to be a way that Miami just find a way. They develop a guy, they find a guy, somehow they just do it. But it seems like finally this year, those guys just aren't on the roster. There isn't another Gabe Vincent. There isn't another Max Strus sitting on the roster like there was 2 years ago when they just stepped in the rotation and just all of a sudden became good NBA rotational guys and now are set to be making over like a combined 20, 25 plus mil next year. Those guys don't exist anymore. They don't have that, especially at the guard position. So barring a Dame trade, they'll still be good next year just because of Jimmy and Bam and how impactful they are. And they have a few good depth pieces, but they're probably going to be in and around the play-in tournament again, but actually be a play-in tournament caliber team next year, unlike how they performed in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, you don't see those Cinderella runs happen too often, and this team doesn't seem like they'll be good enough in the regular season to make magic like that happen, because we see Jimmy Butler get hot, but we don't see Jimmy Butler do that for 82 games straight. And their way forward is probably a 3-team trade. I don't think there's a way where they can really make a Dame trade happen directly. I think, yes, Hero he's a piece that a lot of teams would probably want, but just by himself, it's not going to be enough to just say, hey, Damian Lillard for like Tyler Hero and like another random guy. You're going to have to get a third team involved, and if anybody's going to do it, it'll be Pat Riley, but we'll see. I think it is time to move on, though, and we're going to move to the next team that's also in limbo because as we're recording on July 2nd, we also do not know the status of one trade request put in by Mr. James Harden. So how are we feeling? I think we can start with Devin here. We've started with Devin since Toronto at the very beginning. So what's going on in Philadelphia?
Well, first off, before I mention James Harden, I just want to say that I really hope they give Maxey his bag next year. I'm sure they will, but it was very unfortunate he did not get his extension this year. I understand why. Financially, they're going to have only 2 or 3 other guys under contract next year and a ton of cap space. And especially with James Harden walking, they might need that cap space next year to sign someone. I haven't looked at who said free agents could be next summer, but they might need that flexibility to bring in someone alongside Joel if Joel doesn't indeed ask out with James Harden's move. Now, James Harden asking out, I did not expect it. I thought it was just he's a free agent. He's going to go. But we're seeing more and more so again this year, just like the past few years. Free agency is just not the way guys change teams anymore. It's just not. Like Jalen Brunson and Fred VanVleet are the premium free agency signings of guys that have changed teams over the last 3 or 4 years. It just doesn't happen that way anymore. It's sign and trades on occasion, and more often than not, it's just guys request to trade. And even more so to extreme extent in James Harden's case, He was a free agent and opted in so he could be traded. That's just the way it works now. So you have way more leverage to actually go where you want to be. And I don't see a way where a James Harden trade makes Philly better. No team that is going to be trading for James Harden is going to say, hey, here, take an equally as good player. They're going to be sending you salary fillers, probably a decent young guy, and some picks. So there's no way Philly improve from this. There's no way Philly remain amongst the top of the teams in the East, like the Celtics, like the Bucks. They're probably going to drop a tier below. Now, they're still going to have Maxey. They're still going to have Embiid. They're likely still going to have Tobias Harris for next year, and he probably steps into that third option role more so this coming year than he has over the last couple of years. They'll still be good. They'll probably still be a top 4 or 5 seed in the East, but there's just no way they're going to get any return for James Harden that helps them next year. Now, they might add a couple of more first-round picks with that cap space the following year. They're going to have flexibility to be able to potentially make a star trade. Maybe Tyrese Maxey gets involved in that. I hope he doesn't, but it's possible, and it's an option they'll probably keep open. That could become a sign and trade for Maxey next year, and he sees his way out of Philly, and they try to make one last push before Embiid becomes an unrestricted free agent in a couple of years. So there's not going to be many avenues for Philly to improve this offseason. Their free agency was evident of that. Patrick Beverley's in, but Niang's out, Shake Milton's out, McDaniel's out, none of which are key guys, but we're all fringe rotation guys for them at points in the postseason. Beverley will come in and replace James Harden's role to some extent. I mean, it's a rotational guard, but he's not doing what James Harden is doing. He's just a guard at this point. He's not James Harden. So they're in a tough spot. It was definitely not what was expected. Sure, is it better than him just walking to Houston for nothing? Evidently, yes, but still you're getting put in a spot where your best asset might be an average starter, and that might be all you get as a guy who's actually going to come in and impact your team next year. And that's a tough spot for Philly to be in whilst they have the reigning MVP heading back into next year.
Yeah, say what you want about James Harden. Even as up and down as he can be, and he has been, even for Philadelphia, the man is still one of the premium offensive players in the NBA. Like what he can do as a playmaker, and on some nights as a scorer still. Like you don't find that a lot, and it's going to be pretty much impossible, like you said, Devin, for Philadelphia to replace him. Like they're in a tough position. I mean, it was very courteous of James to, opt in, so maybe they will get something back, but it's not going to be even half of what James Harden has been able to provide for them. So they're pretty much fucked. I'm going to be honest. They're pretty much screwed, man. Like this upcoming season, there's really no way that they're going to be on the Bucks level and the Celtics level. And they're definitely, like I said, they're going to be a tier below that. And even like losing those fringe rotation guys, those are still guys that maybe if given a bigger role, like maybe Shake Milton given a bigger role could have been better for them than just losing James Harden for, whatever the pieces back. We don't even know what they're going to get back in return. So they're in a tough spot. It's going to be tough. Like Maxey's going to have to take an even bigger jump, and he's been taking leaps and bounds every single season. So that's not out of the realm of possibility that he can take another leap. But man, like a team that was one game away from making the conference finals, and this was probably their year to make that championship jump. That window might have just been shut closed on them, especially with James Harden requesting out. So they're just in a very, very difficult spot now. And, shout out to Patrick Beverley. I'm a Patrick Beverley guy. He's not going to bring half of what James Harden brings to this team offensively. So they're just in a very difficult spot. And a lot's going to be asked even more of Joel Embiid this upcoming season.
Which is a terrible thing, noting that the more you want to put on Joel Embiid, as much as he might be top 5 player on earth, what's the issue with Joel Embiid? Well, it's always been his availability. And if you're going to put every single thing on Joel Embiid, that's not really a good recipe for a guy who you want to kind of manage the amount of minutes he's playing, the amount of games he's playing, just the amount of wear and tear that goes on his body throughout the course of the season. A thinning of the roster does not really sound like a recipe for success to them. I think my favorite point you brought up is about that championship window being closed. I've been a big proponent of saying that their championship window opened in probably about halfway through 2018 when they brought in Jimmy Butler. They had Butler, they had Simmons when he was still a great player. They had Embiid. They had a great supporting cast around them of guys, and they had enough to get it done. They didn't. That was okay. but then it fell apart very quickly. Jimmy left. Ben Simmons forgot how to play basketball, ended up getting out of there. And they got very lucky in the sense that James Harden was really the extension of that championship window. They went from the core that they had and Simmons and Embiid to saying, oh, you would think, yeah, when you trade a star away, usually you don't get another star back, kind of like what we're saying with James Harden. But with Ben Simmons, I don't want to even argue about it. He was still a star player, and they traded him, and they still got another star back in James Harden. And that was supposed to be it. Now it's like you come out of this, and they really screwed themselves over. If they would have made the coaching change a little bit earlier, I think things would have been good because their season kind of ended the same way it always did. They went up in the second round, and then they folded at the very last second because Doc Rivers, LOL. But now looking at this, it's like, yeah, I think Devin's right when he says if you get off of James Harden, you're not going to get another star back. They proved us wrong once, and they got a star back in the Ben Simmons deal. But going now, it's like, yeah, their window really might be closed. And you look at Joel Embiid, who's 29, and it's like we can't really build young around him because young these days is like 8 years younger than Joel is. And it's easy to forget that because he took so long to actually start playing games consistently. He didn't play more than like 35 games in a year until 2017-18. So he's older than I think we even assume he is. At this point, I don't really know what Philly does because I'm always the guy that comes in and I say, oh, well, if you're not competing for a title, you might as well rebuild unless you're up and coming. You either need to be getting better every season or you need to be trying to get the best assets possible to rebuild unless you're a top contending team. And Philly's just in this weird spot where of teams that have a top 5 player, they're the only one that I, off the top of my head, that I can't really think of competing for a championship because I'm like, well, Jokic, they just won. Giannis, they won 2 years ago. The Warriors with Curry, they won like 1 year ago. All these guys, like that's probably 4 out of my top 5 right there. And I don't know.
The only team would be Dallas if you consider Luka.
Yeah, if you consider Luka top 5, but even so, like Luka was very young, and they've been trying to put pieces around him to build a roster there to compete for a title. Now, did they fall out once they made the Kyrie trade? They may have, but what they did in the draft this year, even adding some pieces in free agency, I think they're doing a decent, really just fine job of building a roster around those two. So they're still what I would consider up and coming, even if Kyrie himself is a little bit older. Because your core centerpiece was Luka, I think they get a pass there. So of the other 4 of what most people would probably consider the most common top 5, they're just this team where it's like, yeah, I don't think they're getting better anymore. But you guys also just said, yeah, I think they're going to be a tier below what these top East teams are. And that's not a good recipe. That's a very, very bad recipe moving forward. And I don't want to say just, oh, trade Embiid, get him out of here while his value's high, like I'd say for a ton of players, because if you have Joel Embiid on your roster, you got to capitalize on that because there's 30 teams in the NBA. How often is it that you get a top 5 one? Not very often. So especially one that wants to stick around and has never shown any signs of like, I want to leave, I'm on the fence. Like a guy that, as far as we know, is always Philly, Philly, Philly. Like he's the process. He kind of embodies the city. I don't really know what their future looks like long term. I think they can still be like a 4 or 5 seed next year and maybe do a little bit of damage in the playoffs, but I don't see the Embiid second round curse ending. And it just kind of puts them in a place where they're stuck. And what's the time step at? 53-52. I really hope they do not enter purgatory. One
of my homies said that they're the Portland Trailblazers of the Eastern Conference. I'm like, nah, I don't know if it's that deep, but it might get to that point, bro, because they're stuck. It's not like you said, they're not going to trade Embiid, especially because you just got Nick Nurse in there. So it's not like you're going to trade Embiid. Devin mentioned a Maxey trade. Like, that's probably what it's going to come down to, and I'm with Devin. I don't want to see that happening, but that's probably what it's going to come down to. So they're in a very, very, very poor situation for a team that, like you said, has a top 5 guy or a fringe top 5 guy, however you look at Embiid. But there's no avenue for them to get better and really jump into that championship window to where it's like, okay, we are one of the best teams that we're definitely going to win a championship. or at least be right there competing for one this year.
Yeah, and like outside of a maxi trade, like their option is just to be in the middle of the playoff picture this year and then hope that their cap space next year can get them someone that gets them over the hump. But like it's Jaylen Brown, who probably doesn't walk. He's either probably traded or he's extended, or it's Pascal Siakam. And then that's about it. Then you're looking at like DeMar, Tobias Harris, who's their own guy, Klay Thompson. Like there's nothing there that's really pushing them over the top to be that title contender. Like maybe you bring in Siakam, you get enough depth guys, maybe that does it. But that's probably the only option. And I still don't think he's walking either. That's probably a guy who's either extended or traded as well. So there's very few options there for them, but that's probably the game they're going to have to play at this point. It's going to be a maxi trade, or it's going to be a let's just be okay with being in the middle this year and hope that we can make that move next year in the offseason. If they don't, then yeah, like you said, Gabe, they're just in purgatory at that point.
Yeah, they're cooked. They're cooked. Let's move on though, because I really like the Cavs off season, and I want to talk about it. I was kind of indifferent on re-signing Caris LeVert because he was very up and down, but okay value. I could see it. That's fine. But I like the other moves that they made. First, Max Strus, even though you gave him a little bit of a bag, he fills a much-needed void in jump shooting, man. Like, they really need some guys that can space the floor, and Gabe just left the string.
Gabe has said his internet has gone out from the storms, so we are a two-man crew for the time being.
All right, that's all good, man. All good. I can talk about the Cavs, man. I really enjoyed what they did, but Strus, man, I think that was a very key signing. Even though they did have to give up a couple guys in the signing trade, I don't hate getting rid of J.D. Osman. That's fine. Lamar Stevens was in and out of rotation. That's fine. I'm not the biggest George Niang guy, but I feel like he's some added shooting. He's a capable defender. So for the value that you got him for, I'm not really, tripping about that. So, I feel like they definitely upgraded. I like the Ty Jerome signing as a very low-key one. I just think he's a very solid basketball player. And if he gets rotational minutes, he'll be fine. And the last piece I wanted to touch on was Imani Bates. He might amount to something or he might amount to nothing, but you spent a late second-round pick on him. So I don't have any issues. If he turns into a player that people may have been thinking he could have been, like how he was supposed to be like a lottery top 10 pick before he got to college, that's a great move. So, I'm a fan of what the Cavs did, man. I think after the way their season ended, they definitely got a lot better in my book.
The Cavs, I feel like the summer was a lot of desperation from them. I'm going to be honest. This feels like some very desperate signings. This feels like these are some guys that kind of do what we need them to do, but there's nothing better, so we're going to settle with this, but I don't think it actually moves the needle that much. Max Strus, from a shooting standpoint, great. They needed more shooting. They needed someone who could give them a little bit of spacing. That's a good addition. Georges Niang, some shooting, some spacing, another good addition for that standpoint. But they still don't have a dude on the wing who can shoot and defend. It does not exist on this roster. And other than Georges Niang, they don't have guys with size who can do that on this roster. And Niang probably isn't playing for you in the postseason because he's just not good enough defensively. He might be able to shoot, but defensively, he just struggles way too much in the postseason to get regular minutes. It was even iffy with the 76ers this past year. He'd get some run, and then he wouldn't, and then he might get a 4 or 5 minute stint, and he'd just get played off the floor. Now, some nights he'd come in and hit 3 threes in a row for you, and it was great. But if he wasn't doing that, then he was pretty useless out there. So I see what the Cavs are trying to do here, and I appreciate the fact that they're trying to improve this roster with the limited options that they have to do so because of how much pick equity they've traded away to get Donovan Mitchell. But this just feels like we need to do something because we don't feel like we're good enough. But I don't think this pushes them much more towards any type of success. They have a little bit more shooting now. They have a little bit more spacing now. That might help their offense a little bit come the postseason. But for the most part, it's probably just Max Strus, who's a regular part of your playoff rotation, not Georges Niang. And that's a decent chunk of money to be paying someone and a decent use of your mid-level exception on a guy who's probably not a core part of your postseason rotation. And they still don't have that guy who can shoot and defend on the wing. They just need Isaac Okoro to continue to improve. And It looked like the back end of last year he might have been starting to do that, and then he just didn't show up at all in the postseason. So that's still going to be the biggest thing for them is, do they trade him to get that guy, or does he become that guy? That's the biggest thing for them. They are better, but I still don't think they're anywhere near where they need to be to get above the Celtics, to get above the Bucks and be in that conversation. I still think they're a step below. I appreciate the reference, but it felt like a very desperate summer of, we need to make signings. The guys just weren't there for them to actually get what they need.
All right, can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Yeah.
All right, because like, you guys are just completely frozen. For me, I'm on the hot spot right now. Let me tell you, frozen screen me is going to tell you guys that it is storming in Ohio right now. It knocked out my Wi-Fi. And it's because these Cavs moves are kind of mid, bro. God was not a very big fan. Luckily, I can give the Cavaliers the benefit of the doubt. And the main reason why is because I think they can get a ton of improvement internally. They were a very above average, a very good regular season team last year, a very great defensive team. And they got into the playoffs and they kind of folded. And a lot of that was the star guys didn't really show up. Darius Garland was very inconsistent. Donovan Mitchell did not rise to the level that we've seen him rise to before. And Evan Mobley and Jared Allen kind of got dominated in the front court the entire series. So you look at that and it's like, yeah, while getting guys in the offseason and getting better that way would have been very helpful and would have been very nice. I think when the main issue on your team right now and coming out of last year, your main takeaway is, the guys at the top of the roster really did not step up in that situation. At least going into next year, I can come back and say, if they just live up to not even elevating in the playoffs, but just continuing to be who they were during the regular season, they look a lot better in the postseason come next year. And so at least short term, I'm far from pressing the panic button. I'm far from these are desperate issues that have to be solved right now. And while I'm not going to say this roster is perfect, the point about a nice 3-and-D wing is just still going to ring incredibly true. I do think in the long run, they're fine right now. And we should just kind of see where their star guys are at come a year or two down the road and really judge it based on that. Because I don't want to sit here and blame the surrounding pieces when really none of their four core guys I was too impressed with in the postseason last year.
Yeah, they all look kind of mid. Even Donovan Mitchell didn't look good in the playoffs. So, I think those guys need to just step up in the postseason. But I also think the Garland thing, I think that's why that was even kind of floating around, even if people don't believe the source is credible. I don't know. But the fact that the idea was even floating around, I think that's kind of showing they see what Devin's talking about. We need a really solid, consistent wing piece that can do a little bit of everything. And I think that's why Garland would be their most valuable trade chip. I also think there's probably down the line a Jared Allen trade somewhere. That's probably going to happen at some point. I think that's almost inevitable. Might not be, this summer. Might not be before the deadline. Might be next offseason. Who knows? But I think that's definitely a possibility. But I think for the time being, these are kind of filler moves. I do like the Strus signing a lot though, because they just did not have shooting anywhere around Garland, Mitchell. They did not have shooting. But I think adding, Strus, if Niang can just get in the rotation, if he can defend how he did against Boston, because he looked like a defensive player of the year candidate in some of those games. If he can defend like that, he should be able to find some consistent rotational minutes because he can shoot the 3-point shot at a better clip than, pretty much anybody on Cleveland was last season in catch and shoot situations. So hopefully he can just, be solid enough for them defensively to be on the court. But it's going to be tough, obviously with the two small guards, really take that big of a leap if you don't make that big splash trade for a really good wing player that can defend, shoot the 3-point shot. So, I still feel like we're in the kind of the same boat last offseason when they made the Mitchell trade. This is a team, their window's definitely a little more down the line. And, we're just trying to see constant improvement from them year in and year out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at. I agree with what you say about a Jared Allen trade. I think that does seem pretty inevitable. They internally need to get to a point where they can feel comfortable putting Mobley at the 5 full time. Once that happens, then I think that's pretty inevitable. The thing to keep in mind is Donovan Mitchell is only guaranteed to be in Cleveland for the next 2 years. So even though we talk about a long window, they might only have 2 more years, and he might just opt out and decide that he wants to go play in New York or wherever else he wants to be. So I'm sure that's something that they're keeping in the back of their minds as well, and why they're trying to continue to make moves this offseason and probably again next offseason, because there's no guarantee that Donovan Mitchell is alongside Darius Garland beyond those 2 years. So we'll see how that goes, but they're at least trying to make the improvements that they can this summer. Whether it's enough, we'll see come the season. But let's move on to the team that they lost to in the first round, that being the New York Knicks. Josh Hart is back after opting into his deal, and Dante DiVincenzo has joined as well. So Emmanuel Quickley's situation still remains to be seen, but it looks like at the very least, even still, they should have a very solid bench again next year.
Yeah,
just
New
the
York,
Noble boys
man.
linking up, man.
It's a paradise for Reek asking me these questions about what school he goes to, because if he's on the Knicks, he probably goes to Villanova.
There's like a 20% chance he's a Nova guy. No, for real. I like it though. I feel like that's very good value too for DiVincenzo, because I feel like he played really good basketball last season for the Warriors. He was one of the most consistent players outside of like Steph and Wiggins, to be honest. So and Looney. So I really like that pickup for the value. Getting Josh Hart back. I didn't know if I expect him to go back. I feel like I didn't expect him to go back so quickly. I feel like he might have seen what the market was, maybe for like a day or two longer. But I mean, he pretty much re-signed like within an hour of free agency starting. So that's a W for them. I think a lot of the other stuff is just like internal improvement. Like if RJ is going to be around, if he can replicate what he was doing in the postseason, that's a dub for them. Randall getting healthy, I think, is the most important part. People forget he was playing through 2 sprained ankles, just had surgery on that ankle, and that's probably why he was playing as poorly as he was in the second round against Miami. So I think that's mainly the main pieces. But this Knicks team, there's not going to be a regression like when they made the postseason a couple years ago. I think they might have even gotten better. Losing Obi Toppin, I think that's fine because he was somebody that was super inconsistent anyways. Was never really in the rotation consistently, was missing a lot of games too. So it was kind of like inevitable. I like that move for the Pacers a little more, but I'm really like the DiVincenzo move for that amount of money. I really like that a lot for them.
Yeah, the Dante ad was good. You go ahead, Gabe.
I was gonna say just the Knicks going into next year. I like the point of like I don't think they're gonna regress again. I think that Jalen Brunson acquisition was just so solid that he's going to keep them on the right path, even if like RJ and Julius Randle continue to have their inconsistencies. I think at the end of the day, that guy running the point guard position is just going to put them in a spot where they're going to be good and they're going to be a lot more consistent night in and night out. Plus, his draw to bringing in, I don't know if Josh Hart stays, and I don't know if Dante's there without him. Getting those Nova boys like back together, yeah, it's like, oh, cool, they're back together. But I think in terms of like being a free agency sway, you can't tell me that did not factor in at all. So it almost just the signings this offseason almost tell me that the Jalen Brunson signing might be more valuable than we originally thought, because it's not just his play and what he brings, but it's looking like he has some sway as well. And as recently as 2 minutes ago, talking about the Cavs and Donovan Mitchell might go to New York, he sees what Jalen Brunson and the guys are doing, and not saying that he's a Nova guy, but saying like Jalen Brunson as a free agent sway, he might make people want to come play with him, man. I don't know.
I mean, he's sure going to make it a lot more enticing to play in New York than any other Knicks team has for the last decade or so. So there's no doubt about that. It was a very fun scene to watch last year. I don't think we see any type of Julius Randle, RJ Barrett trade this summer. I don't see that in the cards. Like you mentioned, Tyrik, Randle was playing very much injured throughout the majority of that postseason, was just coming back from his injury right before the playoffs. So we had a couple of weeks off. So probably wasn't the most in form going into that postseason either. So he had a great bounce back regular season, had a very good year and as a whole outside of when he was playing hurt during the postseason. So I'd expect for the most part this group is back. I don't expect any significant changes throughout the majority of the rest of the summer. The biggest thing will just be now, does Emmanuel quickly get an extension, or did they just ride out his 4th year on his rookie deal? That's really the only thing in doubt for them now moving through the summer, because I know Quickly wants a bag. And I don't know if the Knicks are going to be willing to give him what he wants, because this dude wants to be paid like a top 15 starting point guard in the league. he's just not there yet, as great as he was last year. He's just not at that level, but very good backup point guard for them, at least for the time being, between him, between Josh Hart, between Dante, between Hartenstein. They have 4 very, very good bench pieces. Maybe they'd look to get someone who can fill in a little bit more at the 4. Now with Obi gone, was likely never going to get a new contract, so it makes sense that they moved off of him before he entered restricted free agency last year, but they should be in a good spot, and there should be no real concern about them not being in the postseason next year. I'd imagine they're comfortably in the mix next year and should be looking to be one of the teams that maybe even jump over the 76ers next year and try to get home court advantage at the first round.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like I'm a lot more confident in them than like Philly, even Cleveland. I feel like the Knicks can take a jump to be like you said, a top 4 team. And their like contract situations is super favorable too. Like these guys are not making like crazy, like that Jalen Brunson contract, especially after what Fred got. That contract looks like gold, man. Gold.
Yeah,
even
contract is so good.
Even Randall's contract's not really too crazy considering he's an All NBA player. Even RJ Barrett, like his contract is decently, a decent sized contract. Like they're making some good decisions. They're paying guys a good amount of money to come play for them, man. So shout out to the Knicks, which is not something that you say every off season, but shout out to the Knicks. That's back really good off seasons.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks the Julius Randle trade isn't terrible or the contract isn't terrible anymore, because I was saying that the other week and getting a bit of pushback on it, but this guy just had another All NBA caliber season. Like
it's like 26 a year or something like that. Like that's solid. That is very solid.
He's making 28 next year and 30 the year after that. Like I got no problem with that for what he's producing and what guys are getting this summer as new deals. Like no problem with that type of money.
Exactly.
That'll move us to the Atlanta Hawks, a team that has finally traded John Collins, got a bag of balls and a bag of chips back for him, but he's no longer on the roster. He's brought in a few young guys from Houston who I'll rant about on Houston's perspective at a later time and date, but nonetheless, John Collins is out. And I know especially you, Gabe, have got to be happy about that one because you have been begging and pleading for Atlanta to get rid of that man for a long, long time.
I hate when there's a bunch of smoke and no fires. It's just years on years on years of trade rumor after trade rumor of he's going to go here, of they're shopping him, and nothing happens. And not that the return they ended up getting was even like crazy or anything, but just to finally have it out of the way, it's like, that's nice. Overall, I know we haven't really been giving grades, but like the Hawks off season, like it's fine, I guess. I don't know. I'm at this weird point with the Hawks where it's like Trae Young, the years keep going by, and he keeps being this crazy offensive engine. And this year they won like 2 playoff games even, which most people did not even expect them to do. They made the moves they got DeJounte Murray, and I'm still just like, we're like, what, 5 years into Trae Young? 6 years into Trae Young? 5, I think. Yeah, 2018 to 2023. And I don't see this team that close to contention. And I don't know how long until you start having a discussion about the franchise, and it's like, how are they going to maximize Trae Young? And while he still is probably, only like 24 or something, maybe 25 at most, it's like usually by like year 5 of having a player who's this good, you would think you'd put like at least a roster around him that's continuing to go to the conference finals. And I know they got there. I'm fully aware that they got to the conference finals, but let's not sit here and act like that roster is going to come out and beat the current version of the Bucks, the current version of the Heat, the current version of the Celtics. I will not mention the Sixers because I think they beat a better version of the Sixers to get there. Overall, it's just, I don't know. It's their overall direction. I don't feel like anything they're doing now or anything they've really done for a while is going to be that move where it's like, oh, yeah, they're maximizing Trae Young and are going to go and try and get a title. You guys might feel a lot more optimistically about Atlanta than I do. But I guess that's kind of where I'm at with them right now. I'm just like almost bored. Like I see them next season. Oh, you guys are going to be somewhere between 6 to 10. and you're not getting out of the first round. Trey's going to get you a game. We're going to get to our postseason predictions next year. We're going to be talking about Atlanta's first round series, and Tyrik is going to go, Trey Young can get you a game, the other team in 5.
Hey, that's usually my playing say, but they'll probably be right back in the playing again, to be honest, because Trey Young is good enough to get you there, like to get you to a playing spot. But I'm so indifferent. I don't know how the hell to feel about this offseason, dude. Like, you're just looking at the names on paper. It seems like a youth movement, man. Like, I don't understand. Like, taking on Ty Washington, Usman Garuba. I like Kobe Buffkin. Like, I think he's gonna be a very solid player, but nothing moves me. Nothing moves me at all. I guess shout out, you got rid of John Collins. We can finally stop speculating who's going to trade for John Collins. Is John Collins unhappy in Atlanta? We can stop talking about that shit now, finally. But, you know, you gave him all that money. You didn't get nothing really back in return. I mean, Rudy Gay is a solid vet to have. Is he going to really help you guys win a lot of games? Probably not. And you're not asking Rudy Gay to do that at this point in his career. So, I don't know. We're getting closer and closer to the time where it's going to be like Trey Young wants out. Who's going to trade for him? And they're just going to be right back into the situation that they were when they moved off of, you know, Horford and Paul Millsap and all those guys that were successful for them for all those years. And they're going to be a bad team again, which might be a good thing. And maybe they can just bottom out and be bad for a pretty decent amount of time, get a lot of young talent, and then they can reset. But right now, like you said, Gabe, this is boring. This is very boring. We already know what we're going to see from the Atlanta Hawks this season. We're just going to see a team that's going to be very mid, like they have been mid for the last 3 years, and they're going to probably get a play-in win, make the postseason, take a game from a top seed, and that's it. It's boring. We've seen the story for the last few years.
Yeah, that very much seems like the story of the Hawks. Shout out John for showing up in the stream. But yeah, I mean, especially last season, there was a lot of talk between Trae Young and Damian Lillard, who's the better point guard, yada, yada. That's not really a discussion this offseason just because of how good Dame was and Trae having a worse shooting year. But the reason I bring that up is because Dame's not just now finally requested a trade. And we all know how Portland have been for the last decade. They had one conference finals appearance. They were always in the playoffs for the most part, but they were never really that good. And a Trae Young-led Atlanta Hawks team is probably never going to be any different, especially considering Atlanta are now very much, like you said, this offseason in a youth movement. They're in a bit of a youth movement because ownership does not want to go into the luxury tax. They're under a mandate to lower the wage bill. That's why John Collins is getting shipped out for a bag of chips and a vet. That's just where we're at. And it's probably going to be the way things continue to move forward in Atlanta until, like you say, might only be a year down the road, might be a couple of years down the road. Trade's probably inevitably going to ask for a trade because he's probably not going to hang around for 10, 11 years like Dame did. And eventually he's going to want out. Atlanta are going to suck. They might try to stay competitive, but they're just going to have to bottom out and reset. And it's too bad because I can't even really blame them for too much of what they've done from a roster building standpoint here. They've done a good job. They've tried to put pieces around Trae Young. You can argue the DeJounte Murray addition was not the right addition and it wasn't the right fit. Specifically on the offensive end, it was a struggle last year. The Hawks were better when DeJounte Murray was off the court offensively compared to when he was on the court alongside Trae Young. So you can question that. But point being is the Hawks have tried to put pieces around Trae, but just like Portland, although not anywhere near as well, have tried to put pieces around Dame. Dame's just not good enough to be your number one guy to make a championship. John's coming in and saying, if you just replace Dame with Trae, do you think those Hawks teams could have made it further in the playoffs?
No.
I'm gonna say no. Even though I think Dame's a better player, but I'm gonna still say no because even like the year they made the conference finals, like that roster was not like amazing. They just kind of ran into a situation where the role players were starting to hit shots. And Philly is Philadelphia. They always find a way to fall. So I'm going to say no, but that's not really like an indictment on Dame. I think it just shows like what Trae Young's kind of had to deal with in his career so far.
Yeah, I don't really see Dame taking out like a Bucks or Celtics by himself. Could he? could he take out the teams that Trae Young's taken out? Like, he could have pulled a comeback on the Sixers. That's the kind of player Dame is. Could he win a first-round series here and there, take out the New York Knicks? Yeah, he probably could have taken out the 2021 New York Knicks. But is he winning a finals in Atlanta? No. Is he even going to a finals in Atlanta? No. And so I think at that point, no, he doesn't make it further.
Yeah, it's a tough spot when DeJounte Murray or John Collins or any one of those guys is your number 2 option in any given year. It's just going to be tough to make it beyond that point, whether it's Dame, whether it's Trae. It's tough. And Trae's done about as good as a job as he can with this group. We know how much of an engine he's been for this team on the offensive end, but just hasn't quite been enough up to this point. But that'll move us to the Chicago Bulls, a team that seems to want to continue to run it back. Nikola Vucevic is in. Kobe White is back. Javon Carter was brought in. And DeMar and Levine seem to be around for the time being to have at least one more year running it back, even though, unfortunately, Lonzo is just not going to be able to suit up.
That sucks the most about Zoe. Because we keep going back to it, but they were playing so good when he was healthy. But got to be real with yourself. Zoe's not coming back anytime soon. The Vucevic thing, that shit threw me off, man. I was talking to Mills because it happened while we was at the gym, and I'm like, dude, what are y'all doing? But like you said, they're just kind of committing to being fake good, and they're just very mid. I don't have much to say about the Bulls, man. Shout out to Javon Carter for going home, playing for the hometown team, and I'm glad he got a little bit of a payday. But I don't have much to say about Chicago.
Yeah, these guys are the bum ass Bulls, man. I don't know what the hell they're doing. Re-signing Vucevic when y'all are already not even in the playoffs as an aging center who is not getting any better. That's crazy to me. DeMar is probably not getting any better. Zach LaVine is probably I'm not going to say he's going to get worse, but I think the player he is the player he's going to be. You're not seeing any big internal improvements. Zoe is not coming back. Let's keep it a sec. Zoe is not. He's done. And if he does ever play like basketball professionally again, it's not going to be at that level of like what he was before the injuries. It'll be like D-Rose MVP versus D-Rose now type like regression. Not saying Alonzo is like an MVP, but you guys know what I'm saying. Just not the same player that he used to be. And they still are sitting here like, oh yeah, we're going to try and compete with DeMar and Zach. And you can blame whatever you want. You can blame injuries. You can blame roster construction. You can blame coaching. At the end of the day, the Bulls bought in 2 years ago. And even at their peak with Zoe and as good as they were playing, this team, as currently constructed, was not a title contender. And they're not going to be a title contender. And they should have known that from the second that they made the Vucevic trade, brought in DeMar, and really kicked this era. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be a fun roster that would win some games and make basketball go exciting again and make it better than the perennial 9 seed that they were forever. And to that, they succeeded for a year, but now a perennial 9 seed. And so at the end of the day, they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing to differentiate their situation from where they were then and where they are now, except now they're older, which means it's just going to suck even worse when you have to get off these guys and you have even less young assets to work with. The Bulls are probably in one of my least favorite spots in the league right now. I have to stamp the Hawks in it in retro because and I'm stamping the Chicago Bulls with it now. As long as DeMar, Zach, and Vucevic are there, this team is in stamp purgatory until further notice.
We need to get an emo purgatory. Stamp.
Stamp that.
Yeah, they're definitely in that spot. I'm not surprised they brought Vucevic back, but it's frustrating when you look back at like if they literally did nothing from when they were around the 11 or 12 seed a couple of years ago, and they could have had Wendell Carter still, and they could have had Lauri Markkanen still, and they would have drafted or at least had the draft pick to draft Franz Wagner. Like, not to say that those guys would have developed the same, but they would have been pretty much in the exact same spot they are now, just with upside and with some guys they could move off of and pick equity. And now they just have nothing. So, yeah, they're in purgatory. They're not going nowhere. They're mid like the Raptors without the upside to actually move some guys. So, yeah, I don't envy Garrett's position right now. That is for sure.
You know what else stinks? Lauri Markkanen is an all-star. That hurts. That absolutely hurts, man. Like, everybody that's left and their potential draft picks that are gone all look really good in the Bulls. We're talking about them like this. That's very unfortunate.
Lowry's not that player if he stays there, though. I'm gonna go out and say that he's not.
It's probably true, but it shows you that the talent was there. It's just more of an organizational thing. Same thing with Wendell. Probably would have been the same if Franz was in Chicago. It just shows you like it's more of an organizational thing than just players being good or not. So
talking about Franz. Talking about Franz. I'm ready to be a little bit more positive. I don't know about you guys.
This is their team.
I think we need to. Let's go to Devin's real favorite team. We opened the episode on Toronto. He's actually an Orlando Magic fan. Devin, are the Magic making the playoffs next year?
Well, let me just put it this way: if I am an Orlando Magic fan as well as a Toronto Raptors fan, only one of them are making the postseason next year, and it's not Toronto. I'll put it that way. But no, I really like Orlando heading into next year. I'm not the largest fan of their off season. I don't think it's hindered them, but I don't think it's done a significant way in helping them make the postseason next year. Maybe they're still looking to make a move or two. I'd imagine one of, if not both of Cole Anthony or Markelle Fultz get an extension at some time this summer, and I'd find it hard to imagine they go into next season with all five of their guards, those being Fultz, Suggs, Anthony Black, and Gary Harris. Someone has to get traded at some point. The most likely culprit is probably Jalen Suggs. I know me and our boy NBA Addict have talked about that at length. He's a big Jalen Suggs fan, but this team is great defensively, and that's why I love this Magic team heading into next year. What they lack at some points, especially from the guard position, is shot creation and shooting. Suggs has the defense, and he sure as hell does not have the shooting, so he probably ends up being the odd man out. But another year of internal development is just the biggest thing for them. It's going to be year 3 for Franz. It'll be year 2 for Paolo. You bring in more shooting and more spacing with Jet Howard at pick 11, which was not the shooter that most people expected to go at 11. Most expected it to be Grady Dick if Orlando was going to take one, but still is a guy that's probably going to be able to come in and give them some spacing and some three-point shooting as a rookie. You're going to continue to have great perimeter defense, bringing in Anthony Black, whether you keep Jalen Suggs around or not. Markelle Fultz is going to be entering year 2 of being healthy and being able to be a very good starting point guard in the league and also very good defensively. So their defense from the guard position is going to be great. Having Wendell and behind in the paint behind those guys just shows how good this defense can be, not to mention the fact that I think Paolo still has upside of that, on that end, not to mention the fact that Franz is good on that end and probably still has more room to improve. So I really like what they have going on here. I think another year in with this group, another year with their head coach, another year of development. That's the biggest things for them. The Joe Ingles addition was nice too. I think that's a solid vet for them to have around and a little bit more wing depth on a team that is lacking still in the wing depth department. That's an improvement, but I think that's still their biggest need. If they could add one guy on the wing, that would be their biggest priority at this point, other than figuring out the guard situation. But this is probably the year they're looking to make that jump. They already made a jump last year. Wasn't to the play-in, but it was a much more competitive team last year than they were the year previous. They looked like the back half of the 2021-22 season, where they started to look like a top 10 defense, where they started to look competitive. They showed that through 80% of last year. And if they can get that and a little bit more through all of next year, then this should be a team that's very much in the play-in conversation. I know Garrett has them as a team that he likes as like a top 6 lock for next year. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think a top 8, top 9 seed is very realistic for the Magic. And I think this is just the start of many years in the postseason for this group to come.
Yeah, I was actually I saw a lot of Magic Twitter. I don't know why I was deep on Magic Twitter for some reason, but Anthony Black was one of my favorite prospects. I think in our mock I had him going to Orlando, so I was very happy with that pick. Now that, like you said, that doesn't mean somebody's going to be the odd man out, but that's fine, man. It's may the best guards win, and I think Anthony Black's going to provide a lot, and I think he's already going to be a really good defender from day one. He's got the size on the perimeter to really guard multiple positions. So I really like that pick. And like you said, Jet Howard was not the name that everybody might have been thinking, but I'm a proponent when you're in kind of that range of the lottery, kind of on the back end, just take somebody that you like. You're not drafting, just to get the best boom or bust potential. Take somebody that you like and you think can really provide the things that you want. And if that's the wing shooter that you think can provide what you're looking for, go ahead and take them. So I didn't really mind that pick at all either. Just getting vets, I like the Joe Ingles. I know Devin tweeted about that the other day. Was pretty excited for it. I like having him, Gary Harris as vets on the team. Really like that. This team's gonna be, I think that they can really make the playoffs next year. I don't know about top 6, like Garrett might have been saying, but if they did, I don't think I would be surprised, to be honest, because they can defend. They got the guys that can put the ball in the basket. Got solid big play. Even Mo Wagner coming back, I think him as a backup is pretty solid for what he provides. It's pretty consistent for them. And I think their guard play is getting better and it's going to be solid enough to where they could really potentially be a top 6 team. I would not be surprised if that happened. But I think at worst, this is a playing team at absolute worst. And I love what their coaching and development has been over the last couple of years. And they just continue to make really good moves. I think this is a W off season for them.
Yeah, I like the fact that Orlando is really good at every position, at least from the starting lineup wise. You talk about how many guards they have. I don't think it's a situation where none of them are good enough to really differentiate themselves. I think it's that none of them are the franchise player because those guys are more in the front court, but all of them are very quality, and it's just making that decision of who's going to be the best fit. But with that being said, it's just for this next season, they're going to be talented in the backcourt. And then you come into the front court, and your main 3 guys is Franz, Paolo, and Wendell. You're looking very talented, at least 5 deep. But then you talk about having 2 guards off the bench, then you're at least 7 deep. And so the more they begin to just round out that front court, it's just going to be a good team from top to bottom, just an overall good roster. Not that they have a player on this roster that's a top 15, top 10 level player, but as far as just being really solid, a team that can play together, and a team that really looking top to bottom, they're a big team. For as many guards as they have, none of those guys are super incredibly undersized. And both guys they brought in the offseason have good height, being 6'7" and 6'8", draft-wise at least, not free agent. But just the roster they're building looks very solid. Whoever is in charge of this, I couldn't tell you the name off the top of my head who's building this roster in Orlando, but a very good job. And your guys' prediction of them being a team that makes the playoffs, comes out of the play-in, and is the team to get there, I could buy into it. I did not buy in last year, and they didn't make it last year. I think they were even better than I expected them to be. And assuming that everybody makes the progression that they should, I like it. I like it a lot. Like I keep saying, I think they're deep, and I think they're going to play together, and I think they're going to play with good defense. And for a young team, that's really a recipe for success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's usually the thing that lacks from young teams. It's the offense is there, but the defense isn't. That's not the concern with Orlando. That's why I'm so willing to buy into them already, at least from a regular season standpoint, is they have the personnel, like you mentioned, Gabe, that have the length. And I think they should be set for a little bit more of an improvement and up into the play-in next year. And another team that I think is set to do that next year is the Pacers. Looked like they were going to make the play-in for a majority of this season. Now Tyrese Halliburton's extended. Bruce Brown is in on a great payday for him. They did well in the draft. They brought in Obi Toppin. I like their offseason a lot, and I'll touch on it more after you guys go, but I think they could be set for a play-in tournament appearance too.
Really good offseason. First off, shout out to Tyrese for getting his bag. He deserves it. Shout out to Bruce Brown for getting his bag. The JJ Redick type contract, I think it's an option the second year, so even just 1 year of $20+ million. He's going to help them out a lot, just bringing in some experience, and he's probably going to get even maybe a little bit more of an expanded role to, show a little more of what he can do. So I like that for him. I kind of touched on the Obi Toppin pickup earlier. I feel like when Obi's done his opportunity, he's been really good. It's just about consistently getting opportunity, and I think he can find that here in Indiana. And the Jarris Walker pick was just amazing. I just think you're feeling the needs of what you were kind of lacking last year, and I think Jarris Walker from day one is going to be able to come in and provide that intensity on the wing. Probably play multiple positions. I really like that pickup a lot. Indiana, this is a team that not even 2 years ago was kind of in such a weird, ugly spot to where they thought that they can continue to make the playoffs as like a 4 or 5 seed or whatever. They finally moved off of most of those guys. They got their franchise point guard locked up, and they just continue to make solid picks, solid moves in free agency, solid trades. W, man. Probably one of the best off seasons, and they were already a team last year that was like really good early on, and then injuries kind of hit, and they definitely fell off when Reese missed a lot of time. If they can stay healthy next year, this is a team that really could probably be like a top 6 team, to be honest.
Yeah, even assuming that they don't make any big moves, just the roster they have, like they've really just bolstered their forward position heavily. And if you want to say your guard rotation is going to be Tyrese and then Buddy Hield or Ben Mathurin, whoever wants to be out there, like that's really a solid 3 guard rotation to have. Having Miles Turner at the center, we know what he brings, and especially just taking passes from Tyrese, he should be able to play that role well for as long as he's going to remain on the roster. And then I think Jalen Smith gave him some quality minutes once he came over from Phoenix, man. Not that he's going to be some great player, but he was given a little bit of a chance, and I think he can have some upside just being a backup big. Doesn't even have to be in a possible playoff rotation. Just spot them some minutes in the regular season. I think he's a fine person to have there. But this forward position, bringing in these 2 guys, I said it when they drafted Jarris Walker. The one thing that everybody kept saying about him is that he plays winning basketball. And for a team that's trying to make a playoff push, that's like the perfect thing for them. But then the other forward you bring in next to him, Bruce Brown, we know he's a winning player. He just won a championship, and his name was all over the place as the Nuggets were doing so. This starting lineup, once again, just like the Magic, I feel like deja vu. Like from 1 through 5, I really feel like they have a solid lineup here. Then a couple of guys off the bench, like Ben Mathurin was great off the bench last season. He hit a little bit of a rookie wall late, but like if he ends up still being on the bench for a fair amount of this season or all of it, he's far from the last guy I'd want to be my 6th man. I think he gives really good production there. And so him leading a bench unit, things look good in Indiana, and they're going to be an exciting team. And as one of the closest teams to where I live, it's like I might want to go catch some games next year because things are looking exciting. And they were already a really good team when Tyrese played last year on a probably, I don't even know what the win pace would be, but it had to be somewhere in the 40s. After he goes out, they completely fall apart. A full season of him playing, and especially with this bolstered roster, I don't want to say playoff lock, but damn near.
Yeah, I'd be very shocked if they're not in the play-in next year. I hate predicting whether a team will make the playoffs if they're going to be in the play-in because who knows? It's one game, but this team looks to be in a much better position this year from, like you guys touched on, the wing standpoint, especially, which was their biggest weakness last year. Their wing defense was bad. Their wing production was bad. They had O'Shea Brissett starting. They had Aaron Naismith starting, and they're fine. But those guys playing power forward regularly, especially Naismith, is a problem, and starting regularly is a problem. So that problem is alleviated. Jarris Walker should be a great rookie. Even as a rookie, I expect him to be able to have a very good impact immediately. Not going to be some star-level guy right away, evidently, but I expect him to be a solid starter from day one and only improve throughout the year. I think Obi Toppin's going to have a great opportunity to showcase himself in Indiana as well. Obviously hasn't got the opportunity that you wouldn't typically expect from a lottery selection, but given he was in New York under Coach Tibbs, that shouldn't be much of a surprise. Tibbs will do that at times, and I think in Indiana, he'll get more of an opportunity. And I think the fit with him and Tyrese is going to make for some very fun highlights throughout the course of the year. So I'd imagine that's going to be a very good fit. And the Bruce Brown edition, evidently, we know what he brings now. Everyone knows what he brings now. And I've been shouting his praises since he was starting to carve out his role last year in Brooklyn. Obviously, before that in Detroit, he was starting to show flashes. Last year in Brooklyn, he really started to show it. But They have a few more pieces now where if Tyrese does miss some games, they're not going to be at as much of a loss. Like Bruce Brown being your lead guard is not ideal, but he probably can do it for some games. You still have TJ McConnell around as well if you need someone else to give you some point guard minutes. So they have a couple of guys now that at least you have something if Tyrese does miss some time, because that was the biggest problem for them last year when Tyrese was out, was they went from comfortably in the play-in to one of the worst teams in the league. I don't expect that drop off to be as significant this year if Halliburton does indeed miss some time, which is probably something you should expect him to miss at this point in time. Now 15 or 20 games. It does seem to be a bit of a trend for him, unfortunately. Hopefully that gets broken over the next couple of years. But the wing improvements is great. The Bruce Brown signing was brilliant. I did not expect him to get that much of a bag, but I am very happy for him, and I'm not mad at the Pacers for giving it to him. Should be one of the most fun teams in the league to watch next year. Probably my favorite offseason of the summer so far from the Pacers, with their draft and the Bruce Brown signing included. And yeah, they're right in there with the Magic for me. They both should be fighting in and around that 6 to 8 seed next year. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of teams in the bottom of the East that might make a jump, but if there's any teams I'm confident in, it's the Pacers and the Magic. I think those are the two teams I'd be most likely to put my money on to make that jump.
TJ McConnell, Boston, Toronto, Milwaukee should be calling the phone just to see if he's available. I'm just saying because I seen somebody posted on Twitter. Indiana has really 15 guys that could get rotational minutes. Like they are deep as hell right now. So I would expect maybe a couple of those names to maybe be shipped off, just maybe for some second round picks or something, because can't play everybody obviously. So I could definitely see that happening. But a damn good offseason. And Rick Carlisle, still a really good coach. So they're going to be playing a lot of really high level competitive basketball this year.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to, I don't know how the name escaped me, but talking to trading TJ McConnell, shout out Andrew Newhart as well, because he had a very good rookie year and is alongside the addition of Bruce Brown is the reason that TJ McConnell is expendable. Just please don't send him to the Raptors, because that's another non-shooter, and we don't need that. We really just don't need that.
The Raptors back at it, and the Raptors back at it again.
But that does bring us to the team that you guys were hoping could make a bit of a play-in push last year, and that was the Detroit Pistons. Have had a pretty good offseason themselves, brought in Joe Harris and Monte Morris, so they look to continue to have a nice blend of vets with their guys, and have brought in Asar Thompson and might have enough to make that push this upcoming season, with Cade back from injury for day one, with Ivy in year two, with Duren in year two, with Wiseman in for a full season now. It's a lot of fun teams at the bottom of the East.
You want to go first, Gabe?
I love it, man. The Pistons, these teams, this trio of teams. I said after the Bulls, I said, y'all want to talk more positive? This is I'm so happy to talk about them section of the East, because the Pistons just have been doing a great job for years. And you guys can disagree with me, but I like what they did this offseason as well. They did not bring any more big men. That was already a good sign, because they're already trying to decide which ones they want to keep. Had a high draft pick. They already know their number one guy is Cade. So they brought in a guy in Asar who, while he's probably not going to play at the point guard position, even though he's kind of been touted as a 1, a 2, a 3. What he was even listed as on mock drafts and everything just varied so heavily. But he seems like he just has so much upside that putting him on this roster, it should fit in well. But if he doesn't end up panning out, there's already so much talent here that I think it'll end up being okay in the long run. However, I do think he'll be quite good. Joe Harris and Monte Morris, these are two vets who are going to fill a good role. Having a good playmaker like Cade on the court, just giving him a shooter to work with, and Joe Harris, one of the best in the league at that. And then if you want to rest Cade some minutes after that, the other guard you brought in, Monte Morris, a premier backup point guard. So really what they've done there in strengthening that guard spot is just going to be quite nice. And then the biggest thing with them, I think, is just going to be the coaching change. I think so much has happened that people aren't really talking about it anymore. But this is a roster that not only has this young talent that has now brought in some solid vets, but has also now led at the helm by a guy who took a team to an NBA Finals, who took a team who was perennially out of the playoffs at the bottom of the West and took them to where they were a year in, year out contender. if he can just echo some of that, the Pistons are just on track to be a great franchise for years to come. They've done such a good job with just stockpiling talent. And at least for the next 3-4 years, I really can't see things going too poorly in Detroit. It looks fun. It's young, so the expectation shouldn't be too high yet. As long as they're a play-in team this year, I think they're definitely on track to do what they should be. But it's bright. The future is very bright here, and it's going to be really interesting to see because we say the same thing about the Magic, the Pacers, and the Pistons of this team could really make a play-in, playoff type jump. And while we predict falls in certain franchises like the Bulls, the Raptors, the Hawks, even the Sixers could look wildly different in a year or so, but some teams will have to fall off for all these guys to move up. I don't know exactly who it's going to be. You can definitely name some over others, but this East is looking real competitive the more we get into this depth, and we just see, I feel really good about them as well.
Yeah, I think the big move was Monty. I think that was what started their offseason from being – or started it to make it a good one. But I also like getting Monte Morris. I'm surprised for the value that he went for. A lot of teams that aren't already on that contender status stage didn't try and go after him because him as a backup point guard, that makes him one of the best at that position in the league. Probably the best now. It was either him or Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones probably gonna be starting. So Monte Morris is the premier backup point guard that you would want. Getting him for no value, I think that's a definite upgrade over what they've been running for the last few years. Cade coming back in its own is just big because he missed a year, pretty much a full year of development, which sucks. But I think Cade's going to take a big leap, especially with Monty Williams being his head coach. I'm excited just to see what he does this year, him and Jaden Ivey together. At first, I wasn't the biggest fan of taking Ausar Thompson, but I feel like he can play a lot of different roles for this team. I think he can be a really good defender on that wing. So I like just getting a lot of good talent that can play on the ball. Hopefully these guys learn how to play off the ball more. I think that would be a big piece in their development, but that's something a little more down the line with these guys being year 1, 2, and 3 between him, Cade, and Jaden Ivey. So I'm not too worried about that down the line. And also the Sasser pickup in the draft. I thought they probably could have got him a little later if they wanted to, but like I said, if you like a guy, go ahead and take him. I think he's somebody that can be ready day one since he was a 3 or 4 year guy in college to really come in and produce. You guys know me, big fan of the Pistons, what they've been doing. So this just continues to bolster. And even Joe Harris, I believe his contract's coming up soon. So, he's somebody that when he plays, really good 3-point shooter. They lacked wing shooting last season. So he can definitely come in and help in that aspect. So, if they push for the play-in or push to get an AC, that would be great. But I just want to see development. I want to see which bigs outside of Jalen Duren really separate themselves from the pack. Is it Wiseman? Is it Isaiah Stewart? Who are the guys that are going to separate themselves? That's what I'm most excited to watch from this team this year.
Yeah, I definitely like what they've done this offseason, and I'm glad you guys mentioned so prominently the Monty Williams edition, because that's my favorite edition for them this offseason and is the biggest reason I couldn't be absolutely shocked if they make the play-in tournament. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not moved by their offseason to that extent. I think they're comfortably a step behind Orlando. They're comfortably a step behind Indiana for this season. Long term, I still like their future. I think they have a lot of talent on this roster. My problem is I just don't know how this all fits together right now. I think they have a lot of reshuffling of assets that need to be done, specifically for how they fit on the offensive end. The spacing we were talking about the Raptors spacing earlier. The Pistons are going to be up there for that too, because Duren's not shooting, Wiseman's not shooting. Stewart's an improved 3-point shooter, but he's not giving you a ton of spacing. Bagley's not a great 3-point shooter. Ausar's not a good 3-point shooter. Cade is an improving 3-point shooter, but is not a great 3-point shooter for the point guard position. Ivy doesn't exactly lay his cap on the 3-point shot either. They don't have many true 3-point shooters on this team. I see guys that will improve in that department, probably Cade, probably Ivy. Ausar's got a long way to go, but specifically for this season, outside of a guy like Joe Harris, outside of a guy like Isaiah Livers, who probably isn't going to be that prominent of a rotational piece, although I do like his upside as some amount of a wing contributor on this team, there's just not much shooting on this team. There's not much spacing on this team. And defensively, I don't think they're anywhere near good enough to make up for it yet. Again, Asar has upside. Duran has upside. I think Cade has a lot of upside on that end, as does Ivy. But I just don't think they're there yet. I think at best, they're like a top 20 defense in the league this year, and their offense has got way too much improvement as far as how the pieces fit and what assets they decide to keep and what assets they decide to move off of to rearrange some things on this team, because there's no way they're keeping all four of their bigs. And Asar, Cade, and Ivy is an intriguing three-man group on the perimeter. Is that the long-term trio, or does one of them get moved for some other star down the line? That remains to be seen. So I think we're probably a year or two away from them being at the level of an Orlando, of a level of the Pacers. And like you say, like there's still teams like the Raptors, like the Hawks, like the Bulls that are still going to be competing for that level. So I like where they're going. I like their direction. I think their offseason is still very good. And I think their front office decisions are still very good. The positive thing is you have Monty Williams in. He's in long term. So you have your guy. And we know Monty can bring a team from a situation that is outside of the play-in looking in, that isn't a great team, and can improve with them, can develop, and can start winning basketball games slowly but surely. So I think with time they're fine, but I'm still not sold on them being quite there yet. I think they're still a year or two away from being quite a postseason team.
Yeah,
I think I'm just. So you can go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. I was just saying I agree.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna I think that's very valid. I guess I'm just putting a lot of stock into. They're gonna bring in Monty Williams, and I just have so much trust in him and him maximizing the talent that they have, that they may just be able to win basketball games on talent alone. And while the fit of the roster may not be the best, I guess I am just putting so much stock in Monty's going to find a way. And I think me and Reek at least are in agreement that Cade is just so good. He's ready to be that guy to I think it could take them a decent way. Now, will they get out of the play? And no, I can see them being a team that gets a 10 seed or maybe even a 9 seed and gets bounced pretty quickly. But I feel like they might be a team that wins some games that they shouldn't on paper, just because their coaching and scheming might allow them to be better.
Yeah, I think if they got a 9 or 10 seed, that's a successful season in my book. I agree with a lot of what Devin said. A lot of the pieces don't make sense right now, but I'm glad that they didn't do a Houston and just start throwing money at people like they could have. I just like bringing in just pieces just to fill the gaps for the time being until guys develop more instead of just throwing bread at people. So, the most important thing, Monty locked up for the long run. You got your young backcourt. Gabe's gone again. You got your young backcourt. Hopefully, Asur can develop, become a capable 3-point shooter. They're just banking on their young guys developing, and I think they'll be fine. But they should. I would like to see them go and get a Grant Williams, throw an okay offer sheet at him or something like that. He's still on the market, that wouldn't be bad. Just to get some front court shooting, because Grant's still a really good 3-point shooter, even though he was in and out of rotation back half of the year. So I think a move like that could be okay. Isn't Bojan still there though? If I'm not
He
mistaken?
is still there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He shouldn't be. He needs to be out. That might be my biggest issue.
They don't have anyone to play there though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
they don't have wings, so they have Isaiah Livers, and Asar is going to play there because they have 2 guards already, but they don't really have promising wing prospects. So
that's right. It's not the worst issue to have. It just can become a little bit concerning when you start thinking we're trying to develop players, but correct me if I'm wrong, he was the leading scorer on the team last year. And
correct.
What are you developing if you just have this 30-year-old dude making a bunch of money that is not a part of your long-term future getting the most touches on the team?
Yeah, that's why I was surprised about them drafting Asar, because I'm the gaping hole is on the wing, and even though I think he can play some wing, there were guys there that are okay, these are actually wing players. Even though Cam fell all the way to 20, I was almost sold he was going at 5 to Detroit, but who am I? I don't run an NBA front office.
Yeah, that Cam Whitmore drop will be studied for years, but that's a story for another day. Instead, we have to move on to a team that took another wing and finally is not in purgatory. They have finally decided to take a direction. Kudos to the new front office in Washington. Bradley Beal is gone. Kristaps Porzingis is gone. For some reason, they decided to keep Kyle Kuzma, but I can't even hate on them for that because they'll probably end up trading him in a year or two and get some assets back, which is better than just letting them walk. So bring in Jordan Poole, you bring in Bilal Coulibaly, and a ton of other picks and pick swaps and all the sorts of things that, even though it wasn't exactly what you would typically think of for the return of a Bradley Beal trade, considering the fuckery of a deal they gave him last year and the fact that they let him just choose wherever he was going to get traded to, at least they got some assets back. And finally, they are out of purgatory.
You know, I just looked up the new GM's name a few days ago and I already forgot it. But given that this was what he walked into, this is a hell of an offseason, man. Hell of an offseason. Like you said, first off, we were talking like around the deadline when they didn't trade Kuzma. We were like, damn, they messed up because they're about to lose him for nothing. The fact that you get him back, if he's a long-term piece or not, you could move off of him in, like you said, a year or two and get some value back. And that can help bolster the rebuild. Jordan Poole, for as much stuff that he got towards the end of his year in Golden State, I still think there's a lot of talent there. And him as like the primary shot creator, that's going to be fun to watch one way or another. So I'm going to enjoy that. And I think Jordan Poole can be a pretty high level scorer in this league. So, they got him for basically giving up Chris Paul, and they got a pick back. That's a W in my book. Like, that's a very, very, very good trade. And their draft pick, Bilal Coulibaly, said it right. The more I watch this film, the more I like this. So I think that's a really good pick. And they still got guys on the roster, like young dudes like Denny, Corey Kispert. Hopefully Johnny Davis can just find some minutes, just play some basketball for them. And the rebuild is going to continue. They're going to keep getting, at least, lottery picks going forward. I like it, man. I really like it. The best thing, they hit the reset. That's beautiful in its own right. And all the picks that they got back in return, that's what I'm looking at their offseason, and I see all those picks. That's good because you're going to be able to do something with that down the line. So really good offseason, man. And just finally we can stop talking about Bradley Beal, the trades, and blah, blah, blah. Like, they just finally did it. They're moving on, pick the direction, and I think they're going to be much better down the line because of it.
Yeah, I think next year this team is going to be horrid, and that's wonderful. That is wonderful. It should be parties in the streets of DC, because after you've just been mediocre for that long, it's amazing. It's amazing to talk about this team and just not be frustrated, to not say, I can't believe they gave Bradley Beal that contract. I can't believe there's like 7 or 9 players in the history of basketball that have ever had a no trade clause, and Bradley Beal's one of them, despite not actively being top 30 to a lot of people. And we don't have to talk about that with this team anymore. Now, we can still talk about it, but now that's a Suns discussion and no longer a Wizards discussion. It's a new day in Washington, and it's an exciting day. I think they're going to see a lot of promise out of some of these younger guys. I think Jordan Poole is going to have a great season. I think Tyus Jones is going to prove himself to be a starting point guard, and I think he'll get a bag. And while long term he may still find himself being a backup in the league, I think him going out of being a starter this year may get him a fair amount of money in the future. Kyle Kuzma, he got his bag. He's probably going to still give him some quality production. There might be some flashes where we say, oh, this team's fun. I don't think they're going to be very good, but that's perfectly okay. Them getting worse while still bringing in some young guys that can be good commodities and really up their value, I love it.
Yeah, like you guys said, it's just the fact that finally they've turned the corner. They're in their new era. They're probably the worst team in the East next year, at least in my eyes, but that's perfectly fine. The Bilal pick is great. I think he's one of the more upside picks of the draft, someone that is definitely going to struggle coming in his rookie year, isn't going to be a guy you're considering for all rookie first team, at least not likely, but I think he's got a ton of upside. He's got a ton of room to develop on both ends of the floor to be a really impactful guy. And the Wizards got nothing but time now. They got nothing but time and opportunity to give Bilal to just develop and get comfortable and find his own in the NBA. So I think it's about as good a landing place as he's going to get. It's going to be a great opportunity for Jordan Poole and a ton of future picks for them to come where they're just going to continue to be able to add assets. They got a ton of pick swaps from the Suns. Not that those are probably going to be relevant for a few years, but throw that in with all the extra seconds. They got a ton of flexibility. And like you say, Gabe, we just don't have to talk about that bloody Bradley Beal contract anymore because I don't know how much longer I could have dealt with that.
Nope.
They were on the no-talk list for a reason.
Good league pass team for like the first 40 games next year.
Dad, give me 10 games maybe.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be honest.
I want to see the young talent, man. I like watching bad young teams with talent that I like a little more. Bro, Jordan Poole is the number one option. Is gonna be must-watch basketball.
Yeah, he's. I think he's averaging a cool 25 next year.
On like 43% shooting.
I never said it was going to be efficient. I said he's going to average 40.
I'm just saying.
I might agree at 25 before Kuzma got re-signed, but now that Kuzma's back, I'm not so sure.
Somebody has to score points on that team, bro. Literally, the worst teams in basketball can go out and score 100 points per game.
Yeah, I might have liked it more if they like traded Kuzma a while ago. So like they could really just be like bad. But Kuzma and Poole might get them some wins. It might get them a couple wins early on. They might have to shut them down at some point.
Yeah, they might, but then you remember that like their third best player is Danny Avdija / Tyus Jones, and you start to think that they might not win that many.
Yeah,
that's some slander on Tyus Jones, bro. That's like he's a top 30 point guard in the league probably because he was the best. Like he was probably like the best backup, and he's better than any point guard on the Raptors right now.
Yeah, but I mean that's a low bar.
It's a low bar,
really low bar.
To be top 30, that means if some team has to have 2 point guards better than you, but if he was one of the best backups, and there's some rosters that don't have 1 point guard better than him, so
that's interesting.
Yeah. I'll give him his credit, but I'm not giving too much credit to a team where he's in discussion for third best player because we just talked about a lot of teams that were like talking about borderline playing, and it's like third best player is like Miles Turner or Ben Mathurin. Third best player is like Wendell Carter or Markelle Fultz. Like,
they're gonna be terrible. They're gonna be horrible. Like,
I want to see what the over/under on wins is gonna be. I'm guessing like 26.5.
I don't even know if it'll be that.
I'm taking that under. I'm taking the under.
You never really see win totals like below like 20 these days. So I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be like 25 or 26.5.
Yeah, but when we're talking about what number team was, the Pistons were the 12th team we talked about, and we had a positive outlook on them. It makes me think like, if we think the East is that deep to where the Pistons are competing for a play-in spot, those bottom 3 teams might be real bad. And honestly, one of the teams we haven't talked about yet in Brooklyn that I'm assuming is coming up here very shortly, I guess we can just get into them now, to be honest. Like, Brooklyn's better than them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Brooklyn is also better than them. So, yeah, this team, the Wizards might be very bad. Getting into the Nets, though, I wish they were worse. And that's what I keep thinking is I just wish they were worse. And Devin's heard me talk about this. But the Nets, Mikal Bridges is a great player, and he's going to be probably an all-star this year, and he completely deserves it. But at the end of the day, like, while it might be fun, these Mikal Bridges Brooklyn Nets are never going to be a title contender. And as long as they keep him here, I don't think they ever become one. Unless they
control their picks.
What do you say?
Do they control their picks? Like, year in and year out?
No, like I think they got a couple of extra picks in the James Harden Ben Simmons trade. They got 2 picks in that, and then they have their own pick every second year until whatever year. I don't remember what year that is. It's
every
probably till
second year.
2028 or 2029 or something like that. But
That's why it's so weird for them.
I'd have to look to be for sure, but they won't have their own pick every year, that's for sure.
Right. And so they're not really in a spot where they can do a crazy buy-in. They're not really in a spot where they can like really build through the draft because they don't have a lot of their own picks. And I mean, I guess they could be a free agent destination, but like they just did that. I wouldn't bank on them doing it again that soon. And so I completely understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're going in the direction they are. Because Mikhail's great. He's going to put a lot of butts in seats, and they're going to win a lot of games. Cam Johnson, he's going to have a lot of good games. He's going to be the reason why you win a lot of those. Top to bottom, there's a lot of players on this roster that are talented. It's just when you look at it long term, yeah, it's cool, but I feel like the immediate future of the Brooklyn Nets is just having your top couple guys play as good as possible to just maximize their value to ship them out in a couple years once you can really start to rebuild. I think it's just like we're going to be cool, but we're really just going to make our stars look as good as possible until we can get them out of here and start with the next era. Because I'll say it again, Mikal Bridges is your number one guy. You're not going to be a title team. I don't think they're bringing in a guy better than Mikal in the next coming years. But they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to be a fun team. I think they'll be a really cool League Pass team to watch. And I'm not going to sit here and say like they're a bunch of bums. I think they'll be a quality roster. Did they win the most after the trade last year? No. But I think they'll be decent. I think I'd probably have them as like a 9-ish seed maybe. Somewhere around that range. But
there's a lot of 9 seeds next year.
There's a lot of 9 seeds next year. The Pacers, the Magic, the Raptors, honestly, like there's a bunch of 9s. There's a lot of teams that are so one of these teams is gonna be like 6. And we're gonna be like, they're 6, but 3 is gonna like probably sweep them. That's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah. I might take Brooklyn over some of those teams though.
I think you're very you're well inclined to do so. Like I don't think that's really the worst take in the world. It's just looking at them short term versus long term. Short term, this team's going to be a lot of fun to watch because Mikal is that guy. But long term, yeah, you're kind of just treading water and upping the value of your assets until it's time to really just hit the reset button again. And it's the repercussions buying in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really like all they can do right now is because their pick situation is just so jacked up. It's like there's no really added benefit for them being bad. But then it's like you said, Gabe, like with Mikal as their best player, they're not going to be good enough to where it's like we're competing. We're just probably going to be like a, lower end playoff team. Maybe win a game or 2 in the first round. And that's probably about it. Like that's just kind of the situation that they put themselves in. And like you said, that's a perfect way of saying it. That's the repercussions for going all in. I don't mind their offseason. I think they had a quality draft. They got a lot of guys that were like, late first round talents. I really like that. Jalen Wilson, I think, is somebody that was good to take a flyer on because he was one of the top scorers in the country last year. So I didn't mind that. And I like Lonnie Walker. Why not take a flyer on him? He had a pretty okay year in LA. And Dennis Smith Jr., I think, was another good pickup. So I think they'll still be good. I could see them being the team that does get that like a 6 seed, or maybe like a 7 seed or something like that. I think they're maybe a little bit better right now, or at least got a little more quality of players to where like a team like maybe even like Orlando or maybe even Indiana, teams that are like more catered towards younger guys. I think Brooklyn might be a little more solid right now than some of those teams. So I don't hate it. I mean, this is kind of what they have to do because it's like, we can't be bad and get a top pick because we don't control a pick every year. And it's like the best thing that they can do, build these guys up like a Mikal, Cam Johnson, and others, and maybe trade them down the line to when they do have their pick situation fine, they can just go ahead, hit a real full rebuild.
Yeah, like there's no incentive for them until 2027. Like until then, they're just better off competing. They don't have their pick next year. They don't have their pick in 2026. But once 2027 rolls around, they got their pick. They got Phoenix picks coming in every second year. They got a Dallas pick in 2029 from the Kyrie trade. So there's no reason for them to do anything but just try and be as competitive as they can be for the next couple of years. And that's probably why they've just continued to look like that's their direction this summer. They re-up Cam Johnson. Seth Curry walks, but you bring in Lonnie Walker, who's about as close as a replacement as they're probably going to get. I can give them a little bit of spacing and some shot creation off the bench. Like you said, Tyrik, I like what they did in the draft. I think Clowney's a nice addition alongside Claxton in the front court, and Dariq Whitehead's a fun guy for them, someone who could have some upside, more so than most guys in and around that point in time in the draft. Obviously, injuries is going to be the biggest thing for him and how he continues to develop and stay healthy, but I think they're in a fine spot. They should continue to be in and around that play-in tournament mix, and there's no incentive for them to be any worse than that for the next couple of years. So they're just going to hang out for now. They're probably going to be in some form of light purgatory, but there's no real benefit to them not being there right now. So they're one of the few situations where it's like, yeah, hang out in purgatory for a few years. That's okay. You've got a fun team. The fans will probably still come out and support it because it is such a fun team. Still got a few exciting young guys there, and maybe you can get a bit more development. I'm not going as far as NBA Addict said the other day, and he said that Caleb Bridges and Cam Johnson could be the next Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
Horrible take. Horrible take.
I'm not going that far. But nonetheless, there is some fun pieces there, and they could at the very least be a play-in tournament team.
The fact that Mikhail's even viewed like as we're talking about him, but that's kind of crazy what NBA Addict was saying. But like we're talking about him as like, you know, he's like now a 25 plus point per game scorer. I would have never ever thought that about Mikal Bridges. So they could become like a spot in these next few years where like guys, you know, go there, maybe just get their value up and get shipped out. Like that can just continue to be a trend. Guys just come there on like maybe like a 2-year deal or something like that. Go there, play some great basketball, get shipped out the next year or something like that. So they're trying to make the most of their situation, which is really effed up from what they've done previously, star chasing and stuff like that. But they could be in a worse situation, to be honest. They could have no picks, have no young talent like they did like a decade ago after they made all of those trades for Piers, Garnett, Jason Terry, and all that.
Definitely, it's definitely could be a lot worse. So it's not the worst situation in the world to be in. That being said, that does bring us to our last Eastern Conference team. Gabe is a wanted man on the other end.
I'm afraid so. I did have to close Discord, man. Discord, unfortunately.
Does happen to the best of us here. But that does bring us to the Hornets. The team on draft night that decided not to draft Scoot Henderson and instead opt with Brandon Miller.
Well, at the end of the day, at least, listen. All this shit that Damian Lillard said yesterday, that didn't happen because actually the Hornets were in cahoots with the Raptors, and the Hornets said, all right, we'll take Brandon Miller because the Raptors, we know you guys are going to get Scoot Henderson from Portland because they're trying to build a contender around Dame. So, can't be too mad. In all seriousness, man, what the hell is that? Scoot was the pick at 2. We talked about it before the draft. And literally when we did our mock draft on here in our last episode, I was the only one that had Brandon Miller at 2, and it was to push Scoot Raptor agendas. But, like, we'll work with it. It's no slight to Brandon Miller. It's more so just, like, Scoot was really just that good. But I still think Brandon Miller is going to be a very quality player for this roster. I think that they have a lot of figuring out to do. I don't think they're going to be too good next year. I think some things you need to see next year, you need to see Brandon Miller was the right pick because at the spot you got him, he needs to be a core franchise piece. He needs to fit well enough with LaMelo, and he just needs to be an overall good player himself. That's what you want out of a number 2 pick. Not that he has to be like an all-star level player or something, but he needs to show that he can be a future all-star and should be in contention for Rookie of the Year given how highly touted he was. That should be the expectation at pick number 2, especially as the guy that you drafted that high over Scoot Henderson. I hate to say it, that's just the expectation that you have. Beyond him, LaMelo, we need to see some health out of him. He's had a lot of trouble staying on the court long term. They're never going to go anywhere if he doesn't do that. It's really the simplest thing possible for him. Just find a way to get your body right, whether you're working with trainers, however you can manage to do that. And I know a lot of it just does come down to luck, but we do need to see a healthy LaMelo if we want this team to go anywhere. And then the last really, really big thing is going to be this Miles Bridges thing. Sign the qualifying offer. He's coming back in, and he's going to bet on himself unrestricted next offseason. If he has a future with the Hornets, I think we'll see this season just throughout what his play is like and kind of what that fit looks like, and even just team morale-wise. Like, I think we'll know by about trade deadline time if he's going to be around next year. If he can be what he was before all of the off-court stuff happened that kept him away for so long, I think he's a very quality piece for this roster, no matter what you think about him as a person. He's back in the league, and talking about it from just the on-court perspective, the way he fit with LaMelo before, if he can do that the same with the added dynamic of Brandon Miller, I think he could have a future on this roster and could probably fit pretty well. Now, outside of that, I think what this looks like is just a lot of these guys they've brought in, Nick Smith Jr., James Najee, Amari Bailey, all these guys are just going to be, let's experiment, let's give these guys some burn, and let's see who's going to fit the best around specifically Brandon and LaMelo and who's going to be the future of this team going forward. I still assume they're probably no higher than like a 12 or 13 seed at best. And after that, maybe they get another good pick next year, and that's like their third core piece if Miles Bridges is out. And it's LaMelo, it's Brandon, and it's some guy they draft next year. Not that they're going to be good this year, but I think they're headed in the right direction as long as Brandon Miller pans out.
Yeah, I didn't like passing on Scoot, but I don't hate Brandon Miller as a prospect. I actually really like Brandon Miller as a prospect. So they could have done worse, but I would have preferred Scoot, but it is what it is. They took Miller. I think Miller next to LaMelo, I think that's going to be a good like sidekick duo type of thing moving down the line. Everybody knows I really like Mark Williams. He played really well for them, especially like second half of the season. So they got their big. They got some building blocks. I like what they did outside of Miller. I think Nick Smith was a really good pick. He was somebody that was like supposed to be a lottery pick before his freshman year at Arkansas. There was some injuries. Really like that pick in him at that value. James Najee was somebody that was like a fringe first-round guy. I think he's going to be very solid too. Even like Amari Bailey, I think he can carve out a role. So I think they did good in the draft, even though I would have preferred them to take Scoot. I still think they made the most of their picks outside of taking Miller. So even though Scoot would have been better, I'm still a fan of what they've done this offseason. They're in a much better position now than what they were, I think, like going into last year. Maybe if you can get off of like Terry, I think Gordon Hayward's under contract too. So like get off of those guys, that would be even better. Get some more, maybe just like, draft picks, even if they're not like first round picks or whatever. That would be fine. But they're moving in a solid direction. Still got some work to do. But like Gabe said, man, the main thing, LaMelo got to stay healthy because this team is only as good as LaMelo Ball is. And especially not drafting Scoot, you're banking on LaMelo being healthy for the long run. Hopefully he's the franchise guy for them. So, we'll see. But I think solid offseason could have been better, but I don't hate taking Miller. I think at least now you got a wing player that you can develop and hopefully depend on down the line.
First things first, I agree with you, Tyrik. I really like what they did beyond Brandon Miller in the draft. I echo the same things you said about Nick Smith. I'm really high on James Najee. I think he can become a starter in this league. Behind Mark Williams is even better. Like that duo, I think is going to be really good. Now you got those two. You got Nick Richards. They've figured out their front court in a very, very good way compared to where they were just 12, 16 months ago. But the Brandon Miller pick, it's just frustrating. It's really frustrating, especially because they're at a point specifically with where guys needed to get contracts this summer that it's not like they needed a starting wing either. Just like they didn't really need another point guard. Like I've been on the record now saying I just don't see how PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, and Brandon Miller are on this team long term, because that means one of those guys have to come off the bench. And I just don't see it. Maybe it happens for this year. Maybe PJ comes back just because Miles Bridges is on a 1-year deal, and then either Miles Bridges resigns next year and PJ gets dealt, or Bridges just walks because PJ ends up being the starting 4. But like I got people suggesting to me now today in the comments of a TikTok that they should put Miller at the 2, Bridges at the 3, and PJ at the 4. And why the fuck didn't you just draft Scoot? Like, it's so stupid that that's the type of things we're suggesting now when you could have just had a Scoot and LaMelo backcourt instead of putting Brandon Miller at the 2. So that's the type of predicament they've got themselves in now, where they might just end up losing one of these forwards for less than would be their actual value if they actually had leverage. Hopefully that's not what ends up happening, but I don't see a way out of it, because I know PJ Washington's going to be happy to just come back and sit on the bench again. Like, is he going to be a backup 4? Is he going to be a backup 5? Is he going to play that flex role again where he's flipping back and forth? Probably not, because he's proved he should be a starter in this league. I like the rest of their offseason, but that part was frustrating.
It's just, I think, a time will tell thing. Like, as far as that whole, like, having a bunch of forwards debacle, I mean, PJ Washington is cool, but, like, if Miles Bridges is there long term, I know which 2 out of those 3 guys I want long term. You're just going to have to look back in like 5 years and be like, oh, is Brandon Miller just like cool and Scoot is this star? Or what if Scoot doesn't really pan out the way he thinks he's going to? Or maybe they both pan out and it's just like, oh, this guy just fits here better. We just kind of have to see. And it doesn't look great right now, but at the same time, it's not like it was this gigantic jump. I think everybody knew like Brandon Miller was the 3rd guy if Scoot was to go number 2. So it's not like somebody who was supposed to be like pick 7 per se jumped up and was all of a sudden number 2. It's almost kind of reminiscent of last year where, you know, everybody thought that Jabari was the number 1 guy forever. And then at the last second, Paolo jumped up and ended up becoming number 1. And that last second jump proved to pan out. Now, will Brandon Miller jumping up at the last second to 2 above Scoot, will that pan out? I don't know. I will say it doesn't look as promising because Paolo really did just look that good coming out. But it's really just a time will tell thing for me. I don't want to be too harsh because we keep saying, oh, it's no knock against Brandon Miller. It's just the level of player Scoot is. And we don't know that Brandon Miller will not be that level of player. I will say he is a bit delusional when it comes to his predictions for what the Hornets will be doing soon. But as far as a basketball player, he still has a ton of potential and could be very good. So I do not want to jump the gun on like hating this pick.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not like another Michael Kidd-Gilchrist type of situation where they took by far the worst guy out of the top 3 prospects. Just hoping for Hornets fans' sakes because they might lose their mind if that happens.
Yeah, let's sure hope not. That being said, after my negative rant, I do still think if all goes well and LaMelo can stay healthy, they can borderline push for the play-in next year. But I've also said that. Oh, for sure they can.
I think it's possible.
Why can't they though? Because the last time that Miles Bridges was on the team and LaMelo was healthy, they were in the play-in, and now they have a center. And PJ Washington.
Because I feel like the East is stronger than it was at that point. Like, I didn't feel good. Yeah, I didn't feel as good about the Magic. I didn't feel as good about the Pacers. I didn't feel as good about, like, even the Pistons. Like, the Bulls and Raptors and Hawks were all, like, kind of shitting on. But, I mean, at the end of the day, they have the pure talent and have been there enough and have won enough games to say I think they're still going to be above them. Like,
I would still pick these guys like behind the Pacers and the Magic, but like if they're healthy and all goes their way, there's an avenue for them to get there. They probably get pissed on in the play-in just like they did the last 2 times, but I think there's a way for them to get there.
is I guess I'd have to go back and look at the East standings. Excuse my
especially when you
keep
keep in mind how good they were defensively at the end of last year. Once Mark Williams actually got minutes, they were like a top 10 defensive team in the league, and now they added a guy who should be a decent defensive wing in Miller, and we're just back, who again is not a great defender but is decent.
Yeah, this year the 10 seed was 40 and 42. I feel like with the Hornets, they feel like a team that win like freaking 36 games, make the play-in, and lose by a.
That's 1,000. Crazy. The last time they made the play-in, they had way more wins than that.
43, I think.
Or sorry, yeah, the what season is it? Yeah, this season. Yeah, they were 43 and 39, and that was the 10 seed that year.
That's crazy, man.
What season was that?
That was the 21-22 season. That was literally the last year they had Miles Bridges on the team. It's only a year removed.
They were like 10 games out of the 1 seed, which is like crazy.
They were, yeah. They were 10 games out of the 1 seed. They were 3 games out of the 6 seed. They had LaMelo Ball out for the majority of the season, and they had their leading scorer out for the entirety of the season.
All right. You know what?
And they were playing Mason Plumlee at the 5 for most of it.
Yeah. So I am definitely willing to give them a chance.
I guess I get the argument.
If they still have Terry, Gordon Hayward, those are still winning basketball players. So they could definitely like sneak into a 10 seed, to be honest. And it's like Detroit, I'm not sold on Detroit being like a 10 seed. So like you never know with like even these young teams, like maybe Orlando doesn't take a step forward like we're expecting. You know, that could definitely happen. Maybe Brooklyn's as mid as Gabe is thinking. That could happen.
I guess I just don't see this team going up higher than 11. I guess injury luck would just change some things, but it's like I can see them being better than the Pistons, and they're definitely going to be better than the Wizards. And then I could see a Nets fall off. I couldn't. LaMelo and Miles Bridges are cool, but like Pascal Siakam, OG, so like there's just more talent. Jakob Poeltl at the rim,
but we have no fit. We have no fit. That's the problem. Genuinely, current day, I think the Raptors are a 12 seed. That's genuinely my current.
You're also a fan though that's upset with the direction.
Oh, I 100% am, and emotions are definitely affecting it. But current day, I think they're a 12 seed.
Like I still think the Raptors are better than the Bulls. I don't even care the play.
Bulls are probably a 13 seed.
That's not saying much.
The Bulls are so bad.
That's not saying much. Jeez.
That's the thing is I just don't buy the talent or the fit on some of these guys. Oh, Corey Joseph went to Golden State. That's a good signing for them.
Hornets have a lot that's unproven because even though Miles Bridges was so good last time, it's like now he hasn't played basketball in so long. It's a question mark. LaMelo's health is a big question mark. I guess your argument is like if they're healthy and things go.
Yeah, I'm like if.
So I guess I get the best case scenario.
Yeah,
it's just like the making a prediction. I would not predict them that high, but yeah, I guess I do see the avenue. There's just a lot of question marks.
Yeah, I probably don't have them in the play-in either, but if all did go well, then they're probably in there. I just don't think all will go well. I think they're much more in the 12-13 seed range. That they're probably not terribly far out of the play-in, but I definitely think it's more likely they don't make it than they do.
They might be like a Wizards type of like team next season. Not like direction-wise, but like just where they are in the standings. Like they might be like right there, maybe have the 10 seed for like a week or so, and then they'll probably fall out at some point.
Yeah, I agree.
I could see them like Utah, like last year's Utah.
Yeah, I expect them to be competitive wherever they finish. I don't expect them to be like a 26 win 13 seed or something like that. Like they should be competitive.
That's the East, boys. That's the Eastern Conference.
That is the East.
2.5 hours later.
Yeah.
Unless you guys are feeling otherwise, I'm thinking the Western Conference might be best saved for next week.
Save that for next week.
Yeah, that's gonna be next time's problem.
We'll be here for another 2.5 hours, maybe longer.
Yeah, plus whatever other signings and trades happen in the next week. So
yeah,
I think that's a next week discussion. That being said, I do have a different game we could play, or if you did want to run the Jeopardy that I believe you did once have, Tyrik, we could also run that.
Let's do the game because I feel like my Jeopardy is just we're so past the draft. It's outdated. I'll come up with a different topic for next week.
Okay, so let me get a flashcard out here so I can keep notes. This is inspired by the little bit I watched of Through the Wires episode in TNT studio this week. Shout out to them for that. It's a very neat opportunity for the boys. But we are going to be, for lack of a better name, it'll be just called Name the Teams He Played For. So I have a bunch of players, some current, some former, but not like super former. Everyone's played within the last 4 to 5 years, for the most part, I believe. I will name the player. We'll start with Tyrik and go on to Gabe, and so on and so forth, just back and forth. You will have to name one team that he has played for. Each team that a player has played for will have a different point allotment, either 1, 2, or 3. 1-point teams are teams that like they're well known for or played a significant amount of games with. 2-point teams are teams that he might have played like 170-ish games with, and 3-point teams are teams that a player would have barely played with. You guys will continue to guess teams until one of you gets a team wrong. At that point, we will then count the points for that player, and we will move on to the next player. So it is, 6:52 my time?
Yes. I have a question on this for you.
Yes.
So talking about name the teams he played for, what if they're on the roster but they didn't play a game there? For example, like Carmelo on the Hawks, like that does not count, right? Or does
No,
that count?
you would have had to have played a game. I did not go that deep into it to find guys that were, yeah, you would have had to have played a game. I'm trying to remember. Actually, I might have done something like that for a current guy, but I don't think I did. If I did, then I'll note that when we get to him. But yeah, so I will keep track of score. Objectively, this is supposed to be a group effort, but for competitiveness sake, I can keep track of individual score as well if we wish.
Okay.
But then, like I'll keep track of combined score as well. Whenever we start, I can set a 15-minute timer. We can keep note of that score, and then in future we can see if you guys can beat your score in the same amount of time at a future date.
Okay, bet.
Okay, so we will start with Tyrik, and the first player is Landry Fields.
The Knicks.
That's a 1-point team. Gabe?
He took the Knicks, bro.
10 seconds.
I'm about to start us off not very good, bro.
Oh, man. Come on,
5
Gabe.
seconds.
He was a Raptor.
He was a Raptor. That is correct. And that is the two teams that Landry Fields played for. Starting with Gabe, Tony Allen.
The Memphis Grizzlies.
That is a 1-point team.
Boston Celtics. I know that's a 1-point team.
That is indeed a 1-point team.
Who else did he play for?
There's a couple more, Gabe. A couple more.
10 seconds.
He feels like he would have been in Detroit, bro.
He did not play for Detroit. That is incorrect.
My other guess was going to be like Milwaukee or Atlanta.
The other team was the Pelicans.
There's only one more?
That was the only other team was the Pelicans.
Oh, okay. I feel way less bad. Tyrik said there's a couple more, and I was like, oh.
I thought he played for the Bulls for some reason. I don't know why.
It seems right. But yeah. Go back to Tyrik with Kenneth Faried.
Let's go with the Houston Rockets.
That is a 2-point team.
Let's go with the Brooklyn Nets.
That is also a 2-point team.
Good job. Denver Nuggets.
That is a 1-point team, and that is all 3 of Kenneth Faried's teams. Moving on to once his teammate in Denver, Ty Lawson. Start with you, Gabe.
You Gabe.
The Denver Nuggets.
That is a 1-point team.
I think he played for the Rockets, so I'm going to say the Rockets. I'm not 100% sure though.
That is indeed a 2-point team.
Man.
He looks like he'd be a New York Knick.
The New York Knicks are indeed not a team Ty Lawson played for. He played with the Kings and the Indiana Pacers.
Did play with the Kings. I forgot about that.
Starting with Tyrik Al-Farouq Aminu.
Let's go with the New Orleans Hornets.
New Orleans Hornets is a 1-point team.
All right, we're going to go with the Portland Trailblazers.
That is another 1-point team.
Okay. Al-Farouq. I think he suited up for the Clippers, so I'm going to say the Clippers.
That is a 2-point team.
Let's go.
Was he in Orlando Magic?
That is a 3-point team.
Good job, Gabe.
Come on, man.
2 more.
See, there's 2 more? Oh, my God. Where did Rook play, man? This is tough.
10 seconds.
Jesus. I'm gonna say the Pistons. I don't think that's right.
That is incorrect. The other 2 teams were the Dallas Mavericks and the Chicago Bulls.
I didn't have either of those on my.
Really, I had no idea.
I was gonna guess like Houston or something.
We'll go back to you, Gabe, starting with Cole Aldridge.
Notable Minnesota Timberwolf, I believe.
That is a 1-point team.
That's crazy. That's the first thing you think of. I know he was a Knicks, so I'm gonna say the Knicks.
That is another 1-point team.
Come on, Gabe.
There are 4 other teams on the board.
4 other teams? I'm so cooked.
I know 2 of them.
He had to be a Memphis Grizzly.
He was not a Memphis Grizzly.
Not a Memphis Grizzly.
He was a member of the Clippers, OKC, Houston, and the Kings. Okay, back to Tyrik for Gorgie Dang.
Let's go with the Spurs.
Spurs are a 2-point team.
Gorgie Dang, notable Timberwolf.
That is a 1-point team.
Former Atlanta Hawk.
That is a 2-point team.
Gorgie Dang got more than that? Is he a Chicago Bull?
He was not a Chicago Bull. He was a member of the Grizzlies.
I don't remember that for some reason, but
me neither.
Back to Gabe for Jordan Hill.
The Lakers.
That is a 1-point team.
I know he was drafted by the Knicks, so New York Knicks.
That is a 3-point team.
I'm cooked. Was he a Clipper as well?
He was not a Clipper. He was a Rocket, a Pacer, and a Timberwolf. That brings us back to Tyrik for Thabo Cephalosha.
Chicago Bulls.
Chicago Bulls are a 1-point team.
Notable OKC Thunder.
This is another 1-point team.
I think he played for the Hawks.
That is another 1-point team.
He was a Spur.
That is not indeed a team that Thabo Cephalosha played for. He played for the Jazz and the Houston Rockets.
He wasn't a Spur?
He up for the Jazz, man. Dang.
He was not a Spur. That is back to you, Gabe, for Anthony Tolliver.
That's a Detroit Piston right there.
That is indeed a 1-point team. Portland Trailblazers are a 2-point team.
I feel like he was a Timberwolf.
Timberwolves are a 1-point team.
Anthony Tolliver. I'm going to say Denver Nuggets. I'm not 100% confident, but I'm going to say Denver Nuggets.
Denver Nuggets were indeed not a team Tolliver played for.
Was he a Buck?
think
He
it's
was
Clipper.
not a Buck. He played for the Spurs, Trailblazers, Warriors, Timberwolves, Hawks, Hornets, Suns, Pistons, Kings, Grizzlies, and 76ers. He was around, to say the least.
Jeez.
Yo.
True journeyman.
That brings us back to Tyrik for Kostat Kufos.
Jesus. Utah Jazz.
That is a 2-point team.
He was a Pelican / I think Hornet.
That is indeed not a team.
He wasn't a Pelican?
He was a Grizzly, a Nugget, a King, a member of the Jazz, and the Timberwolves.
I knew he was a King.
You might have been thinking of Omer Ashik.
I think you're right.
Might have been thinking of Omer Ashik, yeah.
I was.
But that does bring us back to you, Gabe, for Aaron Afalo.
Orlando Magic.
That is a 1-point team.
That is a former Denver Nugget.
That is a 1-point team.
Former OKC Thunder?
He was not a member of the Thunder.
Bro, I'm like certain on half of these, and it's just not.
Was he a net?
He was not a net, no. He played for the Pistons, the Knicks, the Kings, and the Trailblazers.
I had Knicks
remember
in the backlog too. I had Knicks in the backlog too.
He did play for those bad Knicks teams.
Back to you, Tyrik, for Brandon Wright.
Golden State Warriors.
Golden State Warriors is a 1-point team.
The Pistons?
He did not play for the Pistons.
Gabe?
He played for the Grizzlies, Mavericks, Suns, Nets, Celtics, and Rockets.
He wasn't a Bobcat?
He's not a Bobcat.
Wow.
Back to Luke Mamute for Gabe.
Clipper.
He was indeed a Clipper. That is a 1-point team.
He was a Milwaukee Buck way back in the day.
That is another 1-point team.
He was a Houston Rockets.
That is a 2-point team.
Now it gets tough. Was he a Phoenix Sun?
He was not. He was a member of the 76ers, the Kings, and the Timberwolves. Going back to you, Tyrik, for John Henson.
Carolina boy. I should know all his teams. He was definitely a Buck.
He was indeed a Buck. That is a 1-point team.
Oh, outside of the Bucks. I'm between two. I'm gonna go different. Was he a Bull?
He was not a Bull. He was a member of the Pistons and the Cavaliers. Those two teams. He played very few games for both of them.
Yeah, I was saying Pistons and Bulls.
But that is back to you, Gabe, for Drew Gooden.
Cavs?
The Cavaliers are a 1-point team.
He was definitely a Buck.
That is another 1-point team.
Was he a Chicago Bull?
He was a Chicago Bull. That is a 2-point team.
Cool. You can picture him in the Wizards, so I'm going to say Wizards.
That is a 1-point team.
Was he a New Orleans Pelican?
He was not a member of the Pelicans. He played for the Magic, the Grizzlies, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Clippers, Spurs, and Kings were his other teams.
Clippers. That was the team I was thinking.
Back to you, Tyrik, for Steve Novak.
Jesus. I know he was a Knicks, so I'm going to just make sure we get something. I'm going to start with the Knicks.
That is a 1-point team. Note we have 4 minutes left on the clock.
I also knew that he was a New York Knick. I'm going to go – was he a Phoenix Sun?
He was not a member of the Suns, but he did play for your Toronto Raptors. But back to you, Gabe. Pablo Prigioni.
Never heard that name in my entire life. Is he a Sacramento King?
He was not. He played for the Knicks, most notably, as well as the Clippers and the Rockets. Back to you, Tyrik.
Never heard that name. It's crazy.
Jameer Nelson.
Former Boston Celtic, Jameer Nelson.
He is indeed a former Boston Celtic. That is a 3-point team.
Damn. I'm going to be a casual. I'm going to give you the Orlando Magic.
That is a 1-point team.
That's a good one because I was thinking of the Denver Nuggets for some reason. So that's where I'm going.
That is another 1-point team. Got 3
Where
more.
else would he have been? I
think I got one. You get this team multiple times, so you should get it.
10 seconds.
Was he a Chicago Bull?
He was not a Chicago Bull.
He said multiple times.
I'm thinking he's referring to the Pistons, as well as.
Was he in New Orleans?
He was in New Orleans as well, yeah, as well as the Mavericks. That does bring us back to you, Gabe, for Quincy Acey.
Oh, former Brooklyn Net.
Former Brooklyn Net. It is a 1-point team.
Denver Nuggets.
That is incorrect.
What?
Played for the Raptors, the Kings, the Knicks, the Suns, and the Mavericks.
Oh, the Kings, the Knicks. I'm so bad. I'm bad.
Starting with you, Tyrik, PJ Tucker.
PJ, he's been around the block. Let's go with the Miami Heat.
Miami Heat is a 1-point team.
With the Philadelphia 76ers.
That's another 1-point team.
Phoenix Suns.
Suns is another 1-point team.
The Raptors.
Raptors are a 2-point team.
Houston Rockets.
Houston Rockets are a 1-point team.
Oh, I'm forgetting what we already said. Did we say the Bucks already?
We did not. That is the last team. That is another 1-point team.
Let's go.
All right.
Back to you, Gabe, for Jeremy Lin.
Oh, former Toronto Raptor.
We should get these.
Indeed, that is a 3-point team.
We should get these. The Brooklyn Nets.
Brooklyn Nets are a 2-point team.
Laker Nation.
Lakers.
He waved off Kobe.
They are not on my list, but I believe you are correct. So
yes, he played for the Lakers, 100%.
Yeah.
Charlotte. He played in Charlotte.
That is indeed a 2-point team.
He was a Houston Rocket.
That is a 1-point team.
Is there any? I'm trying to lead the.
We haven't said the most. Yeah, I was going to say we haven't said the most obvious one.
Okay, so we said Raptors, Nets, Hornets, Rockets, Lakers, Warriors. He played for the Warriors.
Yep, that is a 3-point team.
I was thinking the Warriors as well, which really only leaves me confidently with the Knicks.
That is a 1-point team. There is still one more team.
I'm getting this. Hold on.
30 seconds on the clock.
Yep. Then play for Clippers. Not Blazers. Oh. This is tough.
The Hawks are indeed the team you played with before the Raptors. That is a 2-point team. Before the clock ends, I will give you guys Tyler Hansborough. We'll start with you, Gabe.
The Pacers?
That is a 1-point team.
Okay. I think he was a Toronto Raptor.
That is indeed a 1-point team.
Was he a Rocket?
He was a member of the Hornets. That was his last team.
I was thinking that. I feel like all UNC guys play for the fucking Charlotte Hornets or Bobcats at some point.
Sure seems that way. Let me do a tally here, and we will have results momentarily. But
yeah, PJ and Jeremy, guys that are like still in the league or only been at the league like 2 years. Like I'm a lot better than a guy who fell out the league in like 2016.
Yeah, I ain't thought of Hansborough in a minute. Glad we got all of Jeremy's teams though.
As far as knowledge that goes beyond like casual, I'm cooked past like 2015, bro.
Nah, you said I've never heard Pablo Prigioni before.
I've heard the name. I could not tell you one team he played for or what he was like.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I definitely wouldn't have known more than the Knicks, but I definitely knew it was a Knick.
What happened to Clipper legend Milos Teodosic, bro? He should have been on here.
Is that the only team he played for?
It might be.
Who's that guy that played for the Lakers? God, I forgot his name. Another foreign point guard.
Okay, so the end total score was 84 points. Gabe contributed 36, and Tyrik contributed 48.
We'll take it, man. We'll take it. Let's go.
So that'll be the benchmark. Whenever we do this next, that can be the goal to beat 48. Hansborough up was done. Okay.
We can get to 100, man. We can definitely get to 100.
Definitely doable. Definitely. I think there's a few more current guys a bit further down the list too that I've got made. So
yeah,
current guys, a little bit more success there.
Current guys, I'm cooking.
Actually, maybe not. Maybe not. There's a couple current guys, and then it gets to some guys that have kind of been out for a few years, but not a bad start.
I know every team that Russell Westbrook has been on.
I can assure you Russ will never be on this.
Yeah, that's easy.
There's a reason I'm putting Jordan Hill and Pablo Prigioni on there. To make you think a little bit.
Jordan Hill was crazy.
What teams did LeBron James play for? The San Antonio Spurs.
I'd remove you from the stream if you gave me that answer.
I was definitely expecting to see a Jeff Green or a Smith on there.
Nah, I feel like I didn't want to go to the obvious guys the first time around. It's like I can't go that obvious. Those are like the first guys that come to mind.
I think I can get all of Jeff
names. Crawford played for, you know.
That's why I went with like a couple of guys like a John Henson because like he spent most of his career with the Bucks, but there's a couple other spots.
I like vaguely remember the Cavs. I felt like he was on. It seemed like he was in Detroit for a while, but obviously not.
Well, he might have been there for a while. He just didn't play.
Yeah, that's a Carolina legend right there.
Yeah, that man was in the league at the perfect time before his prototype of center became very irrelevant.
Facts. Big facts, man. Damn, it's already done.
That's kind of a stressful game, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
Gotta keep you thinking on your toes.
Especially with the time limit.
Bro. Hold up.
Time limit is what makes it like gotta get some team's name out.
Yeah, no, for sure. But otherwise I feel like I'd be sitting here for a minute thinking about teams, which
facts
probably gets old pretty quick.
So wait, I forget. Did I get Thabo wrong by saying Spurs?
Yes.
Who? Yeah.
Oh.
Lotion.
Why did I think he was on the Spurs? Who was that guy? There was some guy that like LeBron put on a crazy poster.
That LeBron put on a poster from San Antonio?
I think so.
I think I know who you're thinking of, but I don't remember the
name.
Thinking
of Tiago? You thinking of Tiago Splitter?
Tiago Splitter, yeah.
Yeah, I think he blocked Tiago.
Yeah, that's
his
what
dunk at the rim or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a very different position.
He does seem like a Spur, though, Thabo.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, but I wasn't sure if he ever actually suited up. Because I remember there was an incident where he, like, basically got, like, attacked by the police or something like that. I didn't know if he actually ever played in Utah.
This Thabo you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, he played 88 games with Utah.
Decent amount.
Shot 40% from 3 with Utah as well.
Did you not say the Thunder, Gabe?
I had to have said the Thunder because the Thunder's the main team I know him for because he's on the retro team on 2K with KD and Russ and Harden.
I must have said the Bulls, man.
Yeah, I think
Bulls
so.
And Hawks.
Yeah.
If I didn't say OKC, it's because I was so confident he was on the Spurs that I was saving it for later.
That might have been what happened to you. I don't remember. Very well might have happened because you were confident on the Spurs.
I was so confident. That's almost as confident as me saying Rob Williams went to Tennessee.
But
you said that? I do not remember that.
Yeah. I was so confident that he was from Tennessee.
But yeah, that's that'll be to your advantage tomorrow now, Gabe, because I think we're doing the same game tomorrow at the end of streams. So you'll have the in on how to play, if nothing else.
They're calling me key holder Gabe, man. I hate to say it.
Key holder Gabe.
I hate to know what game you're gonna cook up on Wednesday's stream if that's the case. Oh, well, for stream purposes, I might as well wrap this up.
Yep.
Yes.
We're good to go. We will be
Yes.
back next week with our Western Conference off-season thoughts, as well as any other trades or signings that happen over the course of the next week. So be sure to stay tuned for that. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like down below and hit that subscribe button. We appreciate your continued support as we have hit 100 subscribers and we move forward from that. So thank you for your continued support. And we will see you guys next week when we talk about our Western Conference off-season thoughts.